911. To report a murder or dead body, press 1.
Fucking stairs.
Why don't you come and have a seat with me?
Look it up. Expired in altercation with inmate number 419.
Punishment without love behind it, you'll come out worse.
Who are you people? Oh, no.
It's sweater weather, motherfuckers.
Is this how I drink? Is this natural? Did I go up? Did I?
Yeah, I wouldn't dare give you notes on being looking natural.
That's the best. There's that episode of 30 Rock where what's his name? Alec Baldwin's character's on screen for the first time and he's like, how do I walk? Is it this? Is it this? He's completely like in his head. And I was like, that does happen. What's it called? Okay, so what's our first question? What was it?
Yeah. You've told me briefly about like your beginnings and stuff, but I'm just interested in how, because I know one thing because I've been through part of the process. I know that just some people at a certain point in like their high school years, they just they like the idea of filmmaking because it's cool, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess what I'd be interested to know is, when was the moment you kind of pushed it further than just being a phase?
Mine was way early. Like you say high school. Mine was probably around 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
I watched a lot of adventure movies. I liked like Indiana Jones movies, Jurassic Park and stuff like that. Actually, Jurassic Park hadn't come out yet. So it was Indiana Jones. And I wouldn't play with my toys like regular kids. I'd take my action figures and I just kind of position them and imagine things. And then I'd position the guy up here who say something I kind of imagined he was doing. And they were more like storyboard filmmaking aids that I was like mashing them together. And I would play with other kids and they would like take, an X-Men and mash it into something. I go, what are you doing? What's happening in the scene, And, but I was aware of kind of what filmmaking was at an early age where I knew that you took shots and you kind of put them together and it wasn't all like live, or whatever. Yeah. And I, for some reason, got in my head that I wanted to make things like Indiana Jones movies. I wanted to do what Spielberg did. So that was like 7. I was telling people already at that age that like, I want to be a film director because I explained it to my dad and he was like, well, that's film directing. And I was like, then that's, I guess, what I want to do. And he had a VHS camera we bought because our dogs were having puppies. We had 2 wiener dogs and they had 4 kids and we wanted to videotape it. And the second we had a video camera, I started filming my toys and I would do stop animation and that sort of thing. And it started with Legos because they were easy to pin down and I wouldn't have an audio track. So I would film the thing, stop animation, and then I would sit next to the TV and do the audio and I would do all the characters. I'd be like, this guy's like, hey, blah, 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 punchline to the joke. Shh. Oh, now we're in the ocean. And I would have to do it.
Wow.
And then I figured out. And then I started making little music videos with my zoo books, which were kind of just magazines for kids that had pictures of animals and told you about animals. And I would play Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns, and I would like play the lion part, and I would do video of the lion, and I would have to push start and stop on the CD player and the video player at the same time, and I would make music videos of images. And then that eventually was like my brothers and my sister, and we started working on just doing little parodies of like X-Files and stuff for our parents' birthdays. But this was all when I was like elementary school. And I never considered doing anything else. The second somebody was like, people have jobs, I was like, I guess I want to make movies. That would be the best one. And so since then, I've been trying to deconstruct them when I watch them and figure out how they do it. And how because when you start shooting things, you start realizing all the things you're missing. Where you're like, oh, they have to like sync this, they have to do that. And I would suggest that to, a lot of people, when you read their biographies, you read Fincher or Spielberg or something, they started when they were kids. So it's great that you don't have to do Super 35 anymore, or Super 8 or anything. You can just use your video cameras and your, now it's just cell phones and stuff. But it was a terrible time because I started on VHS and then immediately it was mini DV, and then it moved on to digital, and then it moved on to prosumer stuff, and everything I shot within 2 years was just not adequate anymore. Yeah, and I was like, I kept learning workflows that no one needed or no one could use. Yeah.
It would have been better to be born in the 50s or something, because you would be set
exactly
for the next 20 years.
What they're using, I'm using. But when did you start deciding that you wanted to be a composer?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I've got to say, I don't think I've ever met or talked to somebody that's a filmmaker, who's a filmmaker who started that early. I guess that might be a local thing, because in this part of the world, it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like in America, you probably are exposed to the idea that this is within reach more.
Oh yeah, and you see characters in movies and TV, like Dawson's Creek or something, or American Beauty, where people are already children or teenagers videotaping stuff. And I can't think of anything right now, but I know that there are movies where even little kids. I think maybe that 80s show, The Goldbergs or whatever, I think he already wants to be a filmmaker. It's something you also see in movies and TV that you're like, oh, kids already do this,
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think what was the first like film that I saw a kid making something with video format. I think it probably was, I want to say, Home Alone.
Right.
It's not really making movies, but I
he
mean,
would
he's
record
handling
things.
a camera,
Yeah.
and he did that. He cut that part of the film with the famous line to scare away the murderer.
Exactly. He was already that did
he
make
was in the cutting room.
that made filmmaking cool. It was just for nerds until Kevin McAllister got in on it.
But yeah, it's probably within reach more for somebody born there to be able to even like think, oh well, I can do that for a living or something like that.
I think in other parts of the world you think that movies come to you, and in America we know we make them there, and so we're like, that's me up on the screen, I want to act that out and just record myself doing it. And a lot of kids start that way, by seeing movies and then recording themselves acting out the movie. And then showing their parents. And but yeah, I already had like a reputation when I was like a little kid as like the filmmaker kid. And then I got into theater when we could do that. But even before that, in elementary, I was already making videos, and I was the kid who made videos. My brother also did that, and he made. Our dad is a professional actor, and he produces theater, and so he would, anytime we had a project that we had to do, it was always a video. It was like, oh, we got to do Antigone or something. We're doing a video version. It's gonna be fun. Yeah, and my dad would be in them, so we had this edge of having like this professional like comedian guy like playing off of us. But yeah, when did you start working on music or wanting to write your own music?
Well, it's a bit of a complex process, because I guess I had an year for just listening and perceiving music in a certain way from a very young age, meaning that what I remember was that I had a connection, a personal relationship with the nature of sound and the nature of harmony and how it made me feel. I had an emotional a connection pretty early on, and my brother used to play the piano, and he played a lot of, I remember a lot of Bach, and I guess I'd say that's probably the best thing that you can play to a young, like a toddler or even an infant. Because the music is very rich in terms of like harmonic structure, although and at the same time it's a multi-voiced, so it's kind of it develops your brain, but also develops your senses and musical like taste, I'd say. And I remember reacting from a very young age. I had I can't say what's the word, nostalgia about it, because I was like 3 years old.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it made me feel a certain way, almost as if I was remembering stuff that I didn't live through.
That is what's great about some classical pieces. You go, this has
Yeah,
always
this
been,
is my
and
life.
it's
Oh, even though I'm like 4, but I already remember like the war and stuff. No, my parents have told me, I obviously don't remember, but have told me that I started walking, like my first steps were from one of the chairs to the piano during one of my brother's performances.
wow.
So he was just playing something, and I just went all in, I guess.
Always stealing his thunder, even at an early age.
But yeah, that was the beginning, and then things didn't go that way at all. And my parents kind of had to not force me, but like strongly push me towards trying out the piano. I wasn't very I couldn't sit still for long periods of time, but they managed to find this wonderful teacher who just worked with me and put my hands on the piano, and I did that for some time. I don't remember. I can't recall if it was like a year, but it wasn't very serious. I was just going from time to time. And they kind of probably knew that I wasn't the type of guy to sit down at the piano for 5 hours at age 11. So there was another pitch to maybe consider the clarinet, to which I, of course, said no. And there wasn't any.
You're such a pain in the ass, David.
Yeah, no.
Everyone else knows better than you.
And then what happened was we went on to meet the teacher and do all that. And my dad offered to buy me my first instrument. And then something changes when you have your first proper instrument handed to you. And it's such a thrill. And also I kind of I listened to a bit of clarinet, and I loved the sound, and it all started rolling. And I'd say that was probably the best ever decision that was sort of made for me, but I also embraced in a way, because my teacher Ivan Germanov, he was I graduated with him high school with the clarinet in his class, and he's one of the most remarkable people I know to this day. He's an amazing teacher, and a person whose impact on the cultural landscape of this town and our small country as a whole is immense. And I was just lucky enough to be one of his last students, and actually that's all of that. I'm giving all this backstory because that's how I got into composing, because his students often, he has such a he introduces you and takes you into this world of music in such a way that very often his students are known to at a certain point find themselves unable to express themselves solely through the instrument that he's teaching.
Through performance,
and they start looking into composition and conducting and teaching and all sorts of stuff. And it all happened around the moment where I started developing my passion for and love for filmmaking and for the art form itself. And so from then on, both kind of went parallel to each other.
Yeah, they kind of went together.
And I told stories. I wrote down like little scripts and stories, and I wrote music. And I was always kind of visual when writing music. I was just, everything had a a certain look to it, a certain role, you know, kind of like you, but much later. Like I was probably 14 or 15 when that happened.
Right.
Is that I whenever I improvised or started writing music, I would just see these. I would see characters. I would see places or objects or stuff like that. So I had ideas, and it was natural that at a certain point, both kind of, you know, both things merged into one another.
It's interesting that considering filmmaking when you can write music is unique, because so many filmmakers are imagining scenes to existing songs and pieces, and you have that advantage of you like, well, I can make my own. But yeah, that was almost exclusively what teenagers do, is they hear a song on a CD and go and shoot something to it and go, yeah, that's what it should be, you know. And you know, people like Tarantino are still doing it, where he's like, he's just been hearing this song for years. It's like, this would be good for like a climax with like a thing. But I'd never, that isn't a natural progression to go, well, I'll write the music for that scene, you know. And that is a unique thing you can bring as a storyteller, which very few filmmakers do. I mean, I know Eastwood does, but I don't know of almost any filmmakers who write their own stuff and are creating the story, which is cool.
It's, I wouldn't say it's the right way to go. Like, I'd say that you have to be really certain of what you're doing, and the fact that you need to write it yourself. Otherwise, I would always suggest working with somebody else, because in my case, I had a partner, and I still do, thankfully, who I worked with, and we, you know, created these stories and scripts and short films together. And he was more so, I'd say, the driving force behind the construction of the plot and gathering stuff for the production and all that. We shared responsibility, but having him around was just instrumental, because I didn't have to worry about both sides at the same time, and I could, at whichever point I wanted to, I could just, you know, lend him to let him do some stuff, and in terms of, you know, moving the plot forward or moving the story forward, and I could just focus on creating music for that, or picking out some music, and so that's very helpful.
It's weird. Yeah. The another composer I worked with said that music in filmmaking, it's really like 50-50, where you don't realize that 50% of the movie's success is the music. And it's a lot more than you think, even though the 50% of everything else is so much stuff, writing, directing, editing, you know, but the music brings, like, it's incredibly important, but it's just one piece of the process and doesn't take nearly as long as the rest. But they really are separate, where I would tell any actor, oh, if you write, it helps you act. If you act, it helps you direct. If you direct, it helps you edit. You know, edit, it helps you, you know, all these things. Music is just hanging out over here, where it's like, you don't need to be good at music to do any of that, and you don't need to be able to do any of that to be good at music. I would say directing does help the composer with storytelling, and writing helps the composer with storytelling, but it doesn't work vice versa, where I could act better if I could just write some fucking music, you know. It's just like it's like, so I would say of all the pieces, I go, that's the one safest to let somebody else do. That's not something that you need. But I do think but I do think, as far as writing, I think the three big for filmmaking are acting, editing, and writing. If you can do those three, you can do anything, and you can make a good movie. If you can't do one of those, I don't think you're really able to make a great movie, at least without relying on somebody else. I don't think a lot of people realize how much of directing is, you're the only person who works with the actors. Everyone else can intermingle, but no one is allowed to walk up to the actor besides the director and go, I don't know about that, you know, delivery. So many directors have no acting experience and no understanding of acting. And I was like, that's like one of your principal jobs. You can leave everything to the editor or the cinematographer you want to, but no one gets to talk to the actors besides you.
It's very interesting what you said. I'd agree with that. You don't need to do a lot of other things for you to be, you know, able to write good music, but practice or ability that I'd recommend to any composer out there that wants to write for drama or for in storytelling is if you can write, if you can create stories and characters and situations and acquaint yourself with the fundamentals of storytelling, you have an immediate edge.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because yes, a lot of especially modern film music is very visual, meaning that both the directors, or let's say the filmmakers and the composers' approach is to enhance the visuals with the music, I'd say. Like it's a very common trend, but that always comes after in at least in great scores that we now can analyze in films. It comes after the music being able to work like almost like clothing to the story. And if you don't know, it's almost like seeing, as a composer, you're sort of like the costume designer of the story.
Yeah.
You see it, the story is there, it's made, it has a beautiful body, you see a beautiful model, and it already has a certain aesthetic going on, and then it's almost, if you don't know anything about storytelling, it's almost like a costume designer designing clothes without knowing the anatomy of the human body.
Yeah,
You're
and
making stuff for something.
you're right.
You don't
And
know.
like I said, it only goes one way. It's good for the composer to know storytelling,
Yeah.
but the storyteller doesn't need to know
Yeah.
composing as much. But what they do intersect on is what the story needs that isn't there necessarily, and what the balance is. Because like you said, you can watch the movie and it already has these, before you get your hands on it with music, it
Features.
already has these attributes that it is accomplishing or not. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is already moving as is. We don't really need anything. This is not scary yet, or this is not, funny yet, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what does it need? And I think bad composing and bad storytelling is often when it's doubling up, and it's like,
Exactly.
we know it's sad. You don't need to add the strings, it's like, it's already sad, but maybe it's not, longing or intellectual or something. It's like, what can we balance it with? And I think that's really what is, when people talk about it's all storytelling, it seems so cliche, because what does that mean? Yeah, storytelling.
Exactly.
But I think it's that decision of, when you're talking to a composer, you're talking to an actor, you're talking to a cinematographer, you have options, and all of them seem like, well, we can put the camera there, we could do this line this way. I mean, which do we go with? And the tiebreaker is usually, well, just storytelling. What's good for the story?
Yeah.
It's like, we can make them laugh here, we can make them, be shocked. What helps the story along? And what makes the audience feel what they're supposed to feel? It was an eye-opening experience. I think I've told you about this when I was working with a sound designer, and they said, before we get started, let's go through, they told me to go through every scene and tell me what you want the audience to be experiencing, what they wanted them to feel or whatever. And I was like, oh man, some of them it was obvious, and some I go, I don't know, they're just watching the stuff, And so, this is the thing. And it was interesting to get into the nitty gritty of that and be like, I guess here I want them to be curious, but here I want them to be shocked, but here I want them to be darkly, like some dark humor, but and what do they want them to feel? Whether they want them to feel sure or unsure, and play with that. And the music is really doing so much of that job, and the sound design. That's why he was a sound designer. It's like that kind of adds the touch. When you have just raw footage, it's somewhat neutral, and you could always take an actor walking into there, just going home and putting down their umbrella and their keys, and you can see that in a Fincher movie, and you just feel like, oh shit. And it's just like, why? They're just putting down their keys, and you go, oh well, he made some storytelling decisions with the music or the cinematography. And a lot of times sound design, just the way those footsteps are, you're like, oh, those are weird footsteps, she's gonna find the head in her fridge or something. And And you can also play with that, and you can mix those elements in a way that you go, she's just coming home. And then when the head fridge comes, it's surprising, depending on what you want. And like I said, that's kind of what makes all the decisions on set. And it's what a lot of times that's what the other crew members need from the director is like, well, what do you want to do? Because we can do a lot of things. Do you want them to be uneasy, or you want a false, comfort or whatever? Composing was really complicated on this project with you because a lot of times I didn't want to make a decision. I didn't want the audience to be sure of anything. I didn't want any, this is clearly sad, this is clearly funny. It was all complicated, and it's hard to direct someone to go, yes, I want music here, but I want it to be emotionally hands off. So you have to kind of, so it can add momentum. It can add, it can be intellectual. It can be mysterious, but it can't really tell you what to think or feel, which is often what music is for, right? And in movies is to add the feeling. And it's like, well, I want music, but I don't want it to make a decision emotionally, which was interesting and when we worked on the trailer, that was interesting, where we kept on coming up with things that were too definite. And we were like, well, it should be a little,
specific,
yeah.
I have to just add one little thing to what you said, but was also to what I last said about storytelling, is that I guess it's a two-parter, meaning that you have to acquaint yourself with storytelling tropes and what's drama in general, and how does it work and weave itself into the audience's like mind and perceptions, but also the things I usually teach to my private groups of aspiring composers is filmmaking has the same, if not even more, a greater volume of tools of expression, tools that filmmakers use to express certain ideas and feelings and all that. So like in music, you have rhythm, melody, like dynamics and instrumentation and articulation and all that, which are tools that you use to express your ideas. And then you have the same in painting, with like composition and lighting and all that. And in filmmaking, it sort of all comes together.
Right.
And a lot of times as a composer, you're almost the last person to work on this, except for maybe the final sound mixing process and maybe color grading. But you're one of the final people to get knee deep into what's happening and influence it like really strongly in some cases. And what I always suggest and recommend is for people to know very well how each artist that has worked or is working on this particular project communicates. So knowing the language of cinematography, or knowing and this is a little bit of a harder one, but seeing the picture and knowing at which points the director is communicating something, not just the actor and not just the plot itself, but there's a clear directorial decision that's been made in that situation, and you need to be sensitive of that and not just score through it like it's it's random.
You're right. I do see you do that, where you notice like, well, the guy steps forward here, there's a pause. It's almost like the director has left you your part of the dance, and it's like you can see the cues of like, and this is for you to
And we analyze scenes like from great films of the past where it's so obvious that there's a clear decision being made with the change of a lens. Knowing lens sizes even is something that a composer, I think, and some people might argue about that, but I think it's good for you to know more and more of the process, because a change of lens is sometimes can be instrumental to how the audience is supposed to perceive the scene or the tension or something. And of course the director can say this, we need to change stuff here or something needs to happen, but from my experience, if you're the more you're able to understand and translate and decipher by yourself, the more room and energy and time you're left with to work with the director on things that are beyond that he needs or they need to communicate with you. So the more you've covered before that, then you're left with the high end stuff with the director.
That's a good point. And I feel that way about casting, where if you cast somebody that is like 80-90% already the character, then you can just focus on that little extra top of how do we make this fascinating, and especially when you're not putting all your effort into morphing yourself into the baseline of the character. You can play with the high end of it. And yeah, that's a good point. If any member of the crew just gets it from the start, then you can really work on excellence instead of on the same page. It is interesting working with a composer, and you want to make sure you both are on the same page before they start writing, because it's mortifying to get the first thing and you go, oh my god, you wrote this beautiful piece of music, you already made something, and it's not gonna and if it doesn't gonna work, you're like, I really wish I had been really crystal clear.
I guess at this point we've talked maybe more about what was leading up to this point, but I am very interested to know, and we haven't talked about this in about the very early stages, but how did it all, what was the first the moment where the concept was birthed?
This is kind of a crazy story. My wife doesn't like me talking about this part because I'll try not to sound too dangerous I talk about it. But I was living in San Diego a long time ago. I was probably like 19, something. And my best friend Fraser worked at the knife shop, and he gave us all little knives. We had little, you never use it. You're like, oh, you open in a box? I got a little knife. But I was crossing the street at night from my apartment complex to go to my car, and a car kind of zoomed by and almost hit me and honked at me, and I flipped him off, being like, hey, fuck you, dude. He turns around and gets out and starts swinging at me, and I don't know why, but instinctively I just took my knife out and I stabbed him. I stabbed a man, and it was like self-defense, but the cops,
he was swinging, so.
He was, but it's it might have been overkill there. So I do that. I push him off. He kind of stumbles onto the ground. I'm like, oh, this guy was probably drunk or high or something. I didn't need to do that. And but I didn't think. I just did it. And I went back. I called the cops. I come back. He's already kind of fleed or whatever, because he didn't. I guess he was maybe had something going on he didn't want to get in trouble for. Yeah. And they just had me hang out with him, the cops, and they were like, we're gonna call some ambulances, see if anyone fits that wound description. And if he's going to be okay, then you can go home. And I was like, wow, that's, that's some white privilege right there. Yeah. But, and they did, they found him. He was lying about it. He said he fell on a grill or something and poked himself with a 3-inch hole in him, and,
you didn't
so anyways,
him in the heart, I'm guessing.
No, it was in kind of the gut area here. And, got him in the haunch, and, I went home, and then a detective called me a week later and asked me if I wanted to press charges. And I was like, no, I'm just glad that he doesn't want to press charges against me.
Wow.
But it was a thing where I was talking to the officers who I was waiting with, and I wasn't being that serious about it. I was like, oh, this is crazy. And they were like, you need to take this, you can't just stab everybody who picks a fight with you. You could go to jail for this. And they were like, you need to say you were, I'm going to write down the, little deposition or whatever. You need to say you were scared and that you were fearing for your life. Okay. And I was like, well, I wasn't that scared. And they were like, you need to say you were scared. They were like, you might go to prison if the guy dies. And I wasn't getting the gravity of, but, I went home and I was hanging out in my apartment a little while later, and they were playing a documentary about prison. I was watching one of those little hour-long prison things, and I was like, oh, I could end up in prison. I could do that. And pretty much what I got from the documentary was you're kind of damned if you do and if you don't. If you're there and it's a max security prison, you have to either join a gang, which means for protection of yourself, which means potentially killing somebody else or hurting someone else, or you are going to be somebody else's initiation and they're going to kill you. And it's like, if you're not a bad person already, you're going to get that way just by being here. And I was like, well, the best opportunity would be, I mean, the best decision in as a society would be to make sure this is a better institution and we try to rehabilitate these people. Second best option is just don't do anything, you know, and just don't make it any worse. And third
Some people
option
put
is
that into first option, but
yeah. So,
anything.
and then the third option is what we're doing, which is actually making it worse and making the people actually more dangerous and more in jeopardy when they get out. And I was like, technically, if we're not willing as a society to rehabilitate and support these people, we should just let them go. That's the better option than making it worse. And I was like, well, how would you get people out of prison? How would you do that? Do you keep them from getting arrested? Can you break them out of jail? Can you this and that? And I just enjoyed fantasizing about how you would realistically do that. And some characters started popping in my head. And I thought about the misanthrope character who doesn't want to join any gang. So he's a target of everybody. And he's, you know, and he's anti, you know, going by anybody's, you know, rules, whatever, and how you get there. And all these characters started popping in my head. And I had thought of a few over the last few years. I thought of a few feature ideas, but that one collected more scenes and more idea. That one filled itself out first. And so I was like, well, I kind of want to make this movie. And I just been kicking around for a while. And then I decided to kind of go forward with it. And I wrote a feature script of it, but I knew I didn't have many work samples, and I make so few movies. I usually work on one for several years instead of a bunch. And I decided to do a big in-depth version of this one, even though it was just 12 minutes. But I'd already made this other short called Casey Jones, and it turned out well. And most of the responses or reviews or whatever were, it's great. Somebody needs to give this guy a budget. Like, they could tell it was low budget. The directing and the writing and acting and all that is fine. Just this guy needs to have more money involved. And I was like, I need to try harder on this next one to make sure I have a bigger budget. And I decided to kind of make a little mini feature where I went, if you take $2 million, divide it, you know, for a 120-minute movie and divide it by 10, you get $200,000 for a 12-minute movie. And so I kind of got the directing a feature experience by making a very expensive short. And there were probably better ways to go about that, but everyone has their own psychological hang-ups. Some people need to do it this way or that way. I needed to know that if nothing works out for me, nobody says yes to me, nobody wants to fund my movie ever, I still have a way to make things the way I want to make them on my own. And I needed to figure out how to do that. And that's what this project was about. And it took way longer than expected.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because probably most people hearing this would if I was I'm sort of hearing it for the first time, but I would think that you're talking about like maybe a year or 2 years ago. And actually, all this that happened, you can tell how long was that? How long ago?
Well,
all of that start.
The gestation of the idea was back when I was 19 or 20, but I actually made a different movie before I started making this one. This was just an idea I was kicking around, and I didn't start going forward with it and writing the short and the feature version of the scripts until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then I started saving up money, and I paid off my last movie by working on an oil rig, and it was pretty good. It's like $4,000 for 2 weeks of work, and you do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Yeah. But you're exhausted. You don't have any time to do like a second job or creative, work on your weeks off. And then I found out about doing research studies where you just sell your body to science, and those make about 300 a day. And so mathematically that was a better deal. And I could do them, fairly consistently. And I started doing that, and I made enough money over a year or two doing that. And then I decided I was ready to build the set, and I rented this hangar from this guy who'd never really worked with movies before. So he, gave me a deal. He probably didn't realize how much more he should have charged. But
he was reconsider now if
he told me that. He was like, well, next time we'll charge a little more, but it was about $1,500 it was a 1,500 a month, and it's for this airline hangar for small planes, and it was divided in thirds that he had with 2 other dudes, and he was like, you can have this third. And I started building that, and I didn't have enough money to hire anybody really, and so I did it myself, and I just built it myself for almost the entire time, and I just used a lot of clamps. And so I would make walls, I would make walls, and I'd clamp things together and screw it together, and it was not the best wood. It was somewhat cheap wood, so I'd have to like kind of bend some warp stuff, and I would just, you know, pick at it every day. It took me 6 months, and then I brought on some help at the very end to finish, like putting up drywall and painting and stuff like that. But most of it, the framing, I did myself. And so then that's already a year and a half in the thing, and then I shoot the thing shortly after that, and then it's 2 years of paying off the rest, because while I'm shooting, I realize I need so much more money, and so I just start getting credit cards and applying to a bunch at once until they're on to me, and then they're like, okay, if you had any more credit cards, and I was like, I just got 6 credit cards, you can't stop me. And I did that twice. I did it once when I was working on the set, and then another time right before we started shooting. I was like, I need more money. I borrowed as much as I could from friends and family, and none of them are rich. They're giving me like what they have. Yeah. And they, you know, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. I do have one friend who had, tragically, her brother died, and they got life insurance policy, and it was divided among the family. So she had like 125 grand or whatever, and she gave me 30. And she was like, you can pay me this back. And she just believed in me, and we were very close. And so that's how I got the money, is a lot of research studies. Then I filled it in with personal loans from friends, and then a lot of credit cards. And I'm still not done paying it off, but I'm close, you know, relatively close. I paid off 2/3 of my debt. Yeah. But again, I would recommend this to no one. This is like my personal psychosis thing, that everyone has their hangups, and mine was that I have to be able to do this without anyone over me telling me you have to change this or that. I needed something that was the vision, that it's wanted to be no compromise, and then after that I can maybe move on to having interference by funders or whatever. But it got out of hand. It just got so much more. But I was totally, being somebody who could generate this money through the research studies, you know, sometimes you make like $8,000-$10,000 a month doing it. And so my friends and family, seeing that I could do that, were more comfortable giving me the money, and they trusted me, and they really believed in what I do. They were like, this guy's killing himself out there for this. I want to help him. And it's way easier to get friends to volunteer or to get people to borrow money from you when they see that you're doing like 200% of your end of the bargain. And they're like, well, that's the least I could do, buddy. True, but it's very off-putting to have somebody like be like, this is hard. Can somebody like give me stuff? You know, it's like you want to make sure the person has exhausted all of their resources before you come begging other people, which is a problem I have with Kickstarters. And I am planning on doing a Kickstarter soon to maybe recoup some of this. But I want, when I see somebody trying to kickstart just like $10,000, I go, just fucking save. That's not, sell your car. Don't ask me for money until you need a lot of money. Like, exactly. How dare you? You know,
you're out of options.
Yeah, you're not out of options. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I knew some of that, but
well, I decided to give you the details of how much things cost and all that, because that's what I want to know as a filmmaker. I'm like, but how much did the hangar cost to rent?
Perfect.
And what does this actor cost? Like, how much is the SAG fee? You know, and I'll tell you more of that later in this interview. When we get to it.
Why did you decide to shoot on film? Was it just an aesthetic, or you wanted something to get something out of it?
It was a few things. The problem is with a lot of things in life is like, you want to be a musician in a rock band, and then you know, and you're a kid and you're listening to music in the 60s, and then you grow up and then it's the 80s and you're like, I want to be in a rock band, and it's all Flock of Seagulls, and you're like, but how do I be in a rock band in the 60s now? That's what I wanted. And that constantly happens with filmmakers, where they go, I believe every filmmaker is kind of remaking the movies of their childhood. You go, oh, why are like dark movies that are kind of gritty coming back? And I go, because the filmmakers of the early 2000s grew up in the late 70s, you know, and it's just like all these in the early 80s. And Christopher Nolan's trying to remake Blade Runner and all that. And I'm not interested in much in movies today. I'm not falling in love with movies today. I fell in love with them as a kid, and they're different now. And I go, well, to be true to me, I have to make movies that are the kind that I love. And I go, I'll never be satisfied in life if I don't shoot something on 35. That's the look that I love. And I can tell the difference. A lot of people, movies nowadays, even though they shoot on film, they're very sharp and degrained and, and color corrected, heavily to match their digital effects. So you can't tell they're on film as much sometimes. You watch a P.T. Anderson movie, you can tell. But so personally, regardless of aesthetic, I was like, it gets me so excited. It gets me so, I want to do this in every way I can. I don't want to make a movie not on 35 if I can. And I also wanted to learn because I had never been to film school. I didn't get to roll anything in a bag and all that. And we ended up actually buying a 35 millimeter camera. There was a 3-perf on sale from Europe that the RE rentals were scaling down their film because they go, well, based on demand, everyone's using our, Alexas that we only need a few film cameras. And they just started selling them for cheap, like $12,000. And I was like, my brother and I went halvesies on it. He made a movie on 35 and so did I. We made 2 shorts. His is called The Devil in the Doorway. If anyone wants to check it out, you can see it on his website. And so that was something personally to me that I was just like, I'm so much more excited about this. Like it added the enthusiasm. The other was very much like I did not feel like it fit aesthetically to shoot on digital for this film, because so much of it is this kind of timeless, earthy, it feels, and it has a lot of the art design is kind of kitschy, old American, Route 66, the movies, it's the title comes from their postcard, which looks like an old postcard. Everything about it was supposed to feel kind of this old America, which I established in my head as a lot with traditional justice and right and wrong. And I wanted to perverse that and be like, the main character Lot is against justice. He's like, it's not good. You're supposed to be just loving them regardless. It's radical forgiveness, and it's whatever. And so that was that. Exactly. And it played into like that 50s, put the bank robber away, it's like, let him out kind of thing. So I needed like a dark version of 50s, 60s kitsch. And also, a lot of the inspirations for the movie before I started shooting it, I went on just those regular, everyone can submit art sites like DeviantArt. And I found a lot of artists that I appreciated that kind of had that kind of hyper real, kitschy, kind of weird, perverse America stuff. And of course, they're all doing digital painting and traditional painting. And I wanted my movie to look like a painting. I've always wanted, that's the difference between digital and film to me, is the film with the random little globules. It feels like a painting. There's something tangible about it. And I want my movies to look like paintings because those are what inspire me. When the only times I've ever been heartbroken at something, that visually, that I'm like, how do I do that in a movie, is a painting. It's never some music video. It's like, how do I get that painting on the screen? And I kind of got somewhere closer to that than I even expected in this movie. And part of it was, what's funny is, we had some exposure issues where I was kind of half the cinematographer and Robert Natchman filled in the other half with me, where I'm directing and I'm on set, but I did all the storyboarding and the lens selection and made the decisions on what lenses and film stock we're using and all that. But I needed him to set the exposures and kind of set up the lights and all that. We shared the responsibilities, and he's a great operator too. His camera work is just fucking perfect all the time. And but I didn't have time to test. He wasn't involved. I didn't have enough to pay him for pre-production. So he just kind of showed up, started shooting. I'd never shot something in this kind of lighting setup on film. I'd done some pre-film stuff, but they were easier. They were during the day and shit. And we fucked up. About a third of the exposures were, the foreground was exposed and the background was too dark. And I had to kind of fix that with color correction and play some, compromising with that. But a lot of it became very grainy. And so whereas a lot of people add grain to their Alexa footage to make it look like film, I took it out where I went, I removed it, but when you remove grain, especially aggressively in software, it gets very smooth and weird. And so I had this complicated process that took days where I would isolate the image into 3 pieces. The highlights were usually exposed well enough that they had very little grain noise. The mids were, somewhat grainy and the darks were very grainy. So I went into DaVinci and I made 3 layers. I degrained all 3 layers completely, put the original footage underneath, and then I would isolate only the highlights, only the mids, and only the shadows, and I reduce them at different levels. So the highlights would be only 20% opacity, and then I'd let the grain of the bottom go, and it wouldn't be very grainy. And I kind of made it all uniformly grainy. And of course, the shadows, I almost kept entirely opacity on the degrained layer, which is a little, and it ended up being almost imperceptible that it all looked accurately exposed, at least most of the shots, but it made it less apparently grainy, which made it kind of look more like a painting to me. So I had the more smooth fall off and the more tangible feeling of the film, but without the grain that reminds you you're watching a movie, which is strange because a lot of people, they go, my first colorist that I ended up having to not use because we couldn't get it to work, remote, and we didn't have the same ideas about the movie.
Yeah.
He kind of said something that I was like, this ain't my guy. Where he said, yeah, well, 35, it looks good, but if you don't project it on 35, the blacks look kind of milky, and on digital, and so you have to crest the blacks down, ends up looking, pretty much like digital. So if if you want grain, you can just add grain afterwards. And I was like, it's not just grain. I'm not spending thousands of dollars on a grain emulator. It looks different. I'm like, can't you tell I didn't say this, but I was like, can't you tell the difference between seeing a digital film and a thing?
No,
there are
immediate.
Yeah, and there are some movies that have done pretty good job of tricking me, but it's because I don't have a comparison. And when I watched like a Ghost Story, I was like, this is on film, right? But if I had seen a 35 millimeter version next to it, I go, oh, that's definitely not film. They get close though. Some people are very good at emulating the look. But then you'll see something on film and you go, oh, never mind. What was I fucking thinking? Look at that. And it's also a nice low budget. People think that film costs a lot. And I go, it's kind of a low budget solution, high budget solution, because you can shoot anything on 35. Like a dude in his bare apartment with one window open, you shoot it on 35, it looks cool. There's something about it. Yeah. And you can't do that with digital. I'm like, you shoot that on digital, I'm gonna be like, this sucks. Yeah. You have to. I'm like, you gotta. It's an empty apartment with one window. You gotta put something on the wall. You gotta do some heavy color correction. Why isn't his costume matching the thing? Yeah. I just shoot anything on 35. It looks good. So that was a big thing for me, that I go, it's going to add an edge to the film that's going to give it all these qualities that I can't afford to give it. I cannot afford a big nuanced lighting thing and an incredible art design, but my shitty set with my crappy walls just come alive when you shoot it with 35 with nice lenses. So I was like, gotta be the best lenses I can get, gotta be 35. And the weird thing about film is that it doesn't look like reality either. And that I think it looks like perception, where and depth of field is the same way, where I go, if you describe a scene to somebody and you go, this beautiful girl is walking down the hall in a high school, you immediately go, oh, right. You see her and she's pretty lit and everyone else is out of focus and everything else matches and is forgettable and she's there. And you go, that wasn't the way it was in real life. It was a busy hall of a bunch of shit not matching. And film and cinema in general, I think, imitates what your perception is. And digital gets a little too real for me sometimes, where I go, it doesn't, like when I see ideas in my head or I remember something or I have a dream, it seems more like 35. There's something about it that is not real in a good way.
Audio guys would probably say the same about vinyl or even tape. I
agree with that.
Especially if you have a good player, of course, to listen on. It's or like even vintage headphones that are a high-end pair, if you have.
And I talk about this a lot with special effects, where I'm like, the audience always knows it's fake. The audience always knows, when you're watching a movie, it's digital, tape, film. They're like, I know it's fake, all of them. I know you recorded this, but they all give me a different feeling. And I feel that way about special effects, where I go, puppets, animatronics, CGI, rotoscoping, we all know that's not a real, Ewok, but each of them gives us a different feel, sometimes nostalgic or dreamy or scary. I think puppets are just scarier for some reason. I don't know why, it doesn't matter, but I'm just watching the Neverending Story, and he's talking to Falcor, and I'm like, something about, or that giant turtle.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is scary.
Even the jaw shark is much scarier. And
it's a big ass shark.
Yeah, but it was crazy. I've seen some pictures of the behind the scenes pictures, and I'm in the first moment that I see, I'm just almost getting scared. And if you see it could be a monstrous CG shark, and you just sit there and wait for it to do its thing.
Deep Blue Sea is not scary until it's a real thing. But and I think there is a place for CG and there is a place for digital. It's just what effect you're going for and what kind of movie you want to make. And for me, movies are about, it's like a magic trick. It's like the audience knows that you're not really pulling a rabbit out, but you can do it in a way that they get into it and they're like, with presentation or whatever. Or you can do whatever. But and to me, I'm always like, to me, movies, I'm chasing the magic. I'm chasing that kind of magic, that movie magic feeling. And I just turn off all judgments and preconceived notions. And I go, when I watch digital and I watch film or I watch a puppet or I watch CG, do I get that movie magic feeling? And it's usually the answer is 35 with a real effect just feels magical. It just gives you that childish wonder and that kind of dreamy, otherworldly. You've moved into a dimension of the movie. And I want that. I call it the movie land kind of thing where I go, I want my movies to take place in movie land. I don't want anyone to think that somebody just walked outside and this is happening. And that involves writing and scoring as well. And we talk about that. Camera work. And we talk about the scoring where it's like, I don't want this to be invisible. I want them to get that. I'm watching like a movie with this. In the score is in the air and adding, and so, anyways, that's it seems pretentious to shoot on film because they're like, you're doing it for no reason. And I go, there's a reason, man. There's a feeling it gives. Yeah,
it can have a reason, although I feel like not everybody that does it has. Well, I'd say not everybody that does it has personal connection with that image that they're looking for, and it's the same with. And you said something earlier that I immediately latched itself into my mind about creating the films that you loved and the films that you were inspired by. And I thought I've thought about that in terms of writing music because there are inherent problems with deciding to score films for a living, and a lot of them are have to do with what you love about music in general, but also with what type of music you inspired you to want to write. So I have that saying that I used to repeat a lot when I was I guess a little bit after high school, is that when I listen to Mozart, I want to write symphonies and I just want to write more. And when I listen to Bach, I have to find a reason to continue writing because it's just. Anytime you do it, if you do it properly, and you're a musician or a composer, the most natural thing you can ask yourself when listening to Bach is, why ever write anything else after this? And different composers had their version of that. Brahms was like that with Beethoven, but and a lot of people were like that with Beethoven, but
I've heard of him.
He's a relatively influential guy in the business. But what a lot of people fall into is the trap of, and that's, I have to say that's a personal, like that's a statement coming from my own views about the future of music and film scoring. But a lot of composers fall into the trap of just because you grew up listening to Williams's scores, or in some cases now Hans Zimmer's scores, doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that the world needs another one of those guys. And second of all, the being confident that you really, knowing that you have something to say, comes before any stylistic or just aesthetic choices you make when you're creating something. The main thing is, I need to say this and I need to express it through this art form. And after that, there are all of the, the stylistic, technical, and all sorts of stuff that follow that. But myself included, a lot of people have the problem of, it's not just influence, that because people would say, oh, I was influenced by this famous composer, and I started writing like him, but then I moved on. It's not just influence. It's the fact that the emotional experience that particular piece of music or style of music had, or the emotional experience you had with that, has latched itself into your psyche to such an extent, if you're a musical person, that you're in the beginning you're often you're trying to emulate that feeling that you have by creating more of the same. And it's a very tough moment when you realize for certain that this is not what the world needs, and if you want to be that emulation of the same is not what the world needs. And if you want to be an authentic artist, you need to find what you have to say that's yours. And of course, you can have nods and you can pay homages to people. That's natural. But you always need to have something that's so important for you to say that it's worth every little bit of effort you put into it.
And I think I struggle with that too, where you just, and my brother talks about it a lot. He watches the Coen Brother movies. He goes, oh, I want to make something like that. And he watches, Tim Burton movies. Like, oh, I want to make something like that. It was a big breakthrough to me to realize that you're not going to make your own favorite movie, and that I will watch things that I would not make all the time, where I watch like a dumb comedy or a very straightforward, serious as hell drama. And I go, I don't make those, but I love watching them because they're an antidote to what I'm missing as a human being. Like we watch things that take us somewhere that we don't usually go. And I was like, but the movies I make, I cannot both be genuine to myself and make a straightforward, serious drama or a dumb comedy. Yeah. My movies are different than that. And I was like, yeah, your movies can be somebody else's favorite, but they're never going to be your favorite. They just have to be you. And it also is really illuminating to hear these great directors who are everyone's favorite. I was listening to William Friedkin talk, and he goes, I guess I keep making movies because I want to make one of those movies that are really great, that stand the test of time, like Citizen Kane or, and Have One Night or something, that really are on the list, the movies that forever. And I was like, I've seen the AFI list. You're on it twice. You did The Exorcist and French Connection. You're done. And he doesn't see it that way at all. And he's like, oh no, I'm not like William Wilder. Yeah, I'm not William Wilder or something. I've never made a great movie. And they're all making the movies of their children. And what really with influences is and this may be an egotistic way to see it, I've never seen myself as imitating people. I've always seen myself as agreeing with people. I remember watching X-Men 2 when I was a kid, and the fight scene with Wolverine and like Lady Death or whatever, I kept catching myself going, I would have put my camera there too. And I wasn't like, I'm not like a Bryan Singer fan. He just agrees with me. And I was like, that's how we make those movies. Yeah. And I was like, it's just as simple as that. I kind of let myself make movies that are similar to people because I'm like, yeah, we both like the same shit. And that's fucking not me imitating them, because it would be imitating if I was going against what I liked. The other thing is, I think that with making like things like you said that you have to make, and making things that are specific to you, we're all just this kind of we're already made as artists. Our influences, what we grew up with, what time we grew up in, and all that, and it's there. And you just have to turn on the faucet and let yourself out. And doing anything else is not gonna be that good. And so I'm kind of like, it's kind of set in stone, and I don't need to worry about if anyone's gonna like it. It's really out of my hands because some people will be the greatest person who makes, I don't know, stop motion Westerns or whatever, and there's no market for it, but they're the best ones. And he's not going to be successful, but he's being true to himself, and maybe he'll get them made at least. And other people are going to be of the time, and they're going to make, Juno or something, which might not hit 20 years later or earlier, but like was what they wanted at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's out of your hands. It was set in motion when you were born that I want to make, what do I make? I don't know, pulpy adventure, dark comedy, action movies. And I'm like, some parts of me feel like it should have come out in 1998 and it would have been part of the, the Fight Club stuff. Yeah. And other parts of me go, you really should be true to yourself, because if you're feeling like, man, all these other movies are coming out that are like this, and I want to make something more like, Butch Cassidy. If you're feeling it and you're alive at this time and you have the same influences on you as everyone else, and then other people are getting tired of that shit and they're going, I kind of miss those Butch Cassidy movies. So I'm always like, just follow your instincts no matter what, and don't care if you succeed, which is hard to do. You want that validation, but I'm like, it's not gonna work, just do it. And if you don't succeed, you don't succeed. And why are you even in this for success in the first place? And who cares?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And
it's scarier with acting though, because a lot of actors are like, what do you want? And it's like, you just are it or you're not, and maybe you're gonna be a star or maybe you're not, and they're just like, I have no control over this. And I go, well, none of us do, but it's more obvious with you. Yeah, you have no control over this.
My next point is, you cast famous Lance Henriksen in our film. I keep calling it our film recently.
It's
and
ours.
I feel like I haven't gotten permission to do that yet. But
I hate when people don't. I'm always like, hey guys, we got into South by, and they're all like, congratulations, Polaris. I'm like, you did it too. It's a collaboration. Yeah. No, I really want people to say our film. I don't like when it's my movie, because it's like a little baby that it's outside of you. Even me who wrote it and directed it, you're like, I'm working on it. It's not me, Yeah.
We're all doing our part in its birth.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were able to cast him in that, and I'm guessing some people are wondering, how do people, because I've wondered that, how do you approach the issue? I guess most of the time, if you're asking that question, you're thinking about the financial aspect of it,
right?
Obviously,
I'll share that little secret with anybody who wants to know.
Yeah, but I'm just interested.
Well, I'll talk about the whole cast first. Is that one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a filmmaker is settling. It's like all you are as a director is somebody who picks people. And you can guide them, but you don't have to. You can just pick them and let them do their thing if you want to, if you're that kind of person. But you pick the wrong person, you're screwed. So you have to be comfortable not settling and going, let's look again, let's go even further, let's try this. And you have to be comfortable also firing people. I hired a few people who didn't work out, and it's just like, I made a mistake. You're not the person who should do this. And sometimes you fire people, you replace with somebody else. Sometimes you don't use them, and you have to do it. You'll realize, I'm just dictating to you. I should just do this.
But that happened in the pre-production process. I'm
yes,
guessing you didn't
where
start shooting with them.
I guess what I mean is that every other movie, I stopped the casting process early and was like, well, these are the people who audition. That's the best guy. What I did with this one is I did a cheap round of auditioning where I offered a respectable but low budget amount of money, and I put the script out there with the just cast yourself kind of Actors Access backstage sites, and I did a big call in New York and LA and saw a lot of people, and only 2 of them were good enough, and I was like, they are cast. I have nobody else. No one else is working out. And I auditioned for my own role too. I'm not me. I auditioned other people for my role. I couldn't find anybody better for me at any level, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. But I needed that peace of mind that I wasn't being just a megalomaniac, and that other people were not out there at the level I could afford.
And that if somebody better had popped up, you would have recognized
yeah.
that? You
I would have definitely, but it's a hard role to. It's a very hard
grasp.
role to cast because the two most difficult roles to cast were the misanthrope and actually Tasha's part, Melissa, the lead female, because people go the obvious route and follow the wrong instincts. Everyone with the misanthrope is playing him emotional and angry. Like,
Yeah.
don't fucking talk to me, like, you know, like, and I go, he's not.
I hate people. Hate
Yeah, I
humans.
hate him. And I go, he doesn't give a shit about anything. And I had to I kind of redirected one guy in the audition. I was like, how would you act if you did not care about how you sat, how you sounded, what people thought, eye contact? You didn't care if people heard your voice loud enough. You do not give a shit. And you only, whatever. It's a very hard thing to wrap your head around. And I was like,
Because it's
everyone
psychotic.
and everyone's, and I talked about that stabbing story earlier. I might have a little bit of on the spectrum of sociopath or psychopath, because I was like, I get it. He just doesn't give a shit, and he, you know, whatever. But the short is much easier. I actually auditioned them with the feature script so they could have some lines. And the Misanthrope has lines in the feature script, and I auditioned them that way. And I was like, man, he's not Wolverine. He's not like, man, I don't care about it. And the other one was Tasha, because her lines are sexual. In the dinner scene, everyone else is playing it like, hey,
Yeah. They
bang.
were seducing the already
And I was like,
seduced guy.
the already seduced guy. But I was like, the audience is going to completely disregard you if you come off smutty. She is a sweet person, misguidedly trying to do something kind that she thinks that her boyfriend will like, and it is like her giving him a birthday gift of like, oh, you love horseback riding, so I got you horseback ride. It's like, oh, but this is too expensive, honey. Oh, but you deserve it. But she's talking about something that's, you know, crazy to other people.
Basically.
And Tasha just got it. It seemed like from the get-go, and maybe Tasha's a little, you know, she's interesting in her, you know, her own perception of stuff, but she did not for 1 second have the instinct to play it gross. She played it sweet and kind. I got you something. I hope you like it.
Yeah.
And she was great. So anyways, so I did my first audition round. I got the girl who played Donna, the what's her name? Clara was cast, and the guy in the dinner scene, Michael, was cast. And they were great. But then I went, I'm not settling. And I went and I contacted agents directly. Instead of having people cast, you know, apply to it online, I contacted every agent that was at a mid-level and said, send me your selects. And that's what you do. You go, I have the script, I have these roles, you give them the breakdown. They go, funny fat guy, I got these 5 people, you know, what's it called? You know, quirky hacker, I got these 5 people. And you look through them, you see their reels, you invite some to read. And that's how you not waste people's times. Doing that, I got Tasha, who was great. And I got Scott, who plays Banks, who was really hard to cast, and he just did it like a glove. He was like I might as well sprung out of the script, you know, out of my imagination. Still couldn't find a lot, and I was very willing to pay less money for a lot. And I even offered it to somebody who I liked, but who turned it down because they auditioned with the feature script, and they said the short was too pared down and perfunctory or whatever he called it. And I was like, really? He was just like, it's like, there's a lot of money, there's a lot, you know, whatever. He was like,
main.
And I was like, this guy was at the end of his life, and he's an older actor, and he does not do things that do not creatively inspire him. And I was like, cool. But I was a little like, but it's fate. I always say that, like, when you make a movie, you're really collaborating with the powers that be or God or whatever. And God will go, oh, you're making a mistake here. Let me just, that's not a good thing. Don't cast that guy. And so I was like, Lot is a hard role, and it is hard to pull off the characters and stuff. Anyone who's good enough to play that role is probably already famous. And so, especially if they're older, it's like, if I'm looking at a 70-year-old actor, how could they have not been discovered by now?
Exactly.
If they're good enough to be that role.
Exactly, yeah.
And he also needs to stand out. He needs to have a gravitas. He would get kind of blown off the stage if he doesn't have as much kooky shit to do. But if you put someone who's got that presence, they will hold their own with the other interesting written characters. Because Locke could come off as a little dry if he wasn't the right guy. He just kind of could come off as professorial and, you know, gushy. So first one of the first people who came to my, so what you do now, you want to cast a movie star. It's all pay to play. You don't go writing them a letter and being like, please, you have to, I've will do
films 1,000 times.
Yeah, I get them. And what you do is they won't so much of the industry is, I just need some little stamp on this before I waste my time that you're not a jackass, because there's a million jackasses who are completely talentless or don't know what they're doing or jack off, you know. How do I have that? That's film festivals. You put your movie in a film festival, they go, okay, somebody else put a stamp on this that it was good enough to be in Palm Springs. Maybe I'll look at it. They won't do that without a stamp. And the way you put your stamp on a casting notice is a casting director. You contact a casting director. What I did is I was like, the best I could possibly get would be Willem Dafoe. And he's at a peak in his career right now, but there was a time in the 2000s where he was doing short films. And I was like, Willem Dafoe would be good. I'll look at his movies. And he did some shorts where he played a robot and something. And I looked at who the casting director was. And I was like, okay, Chadwick Struck. Contacted Chadwick. He's like, I'm going to hire you to be my casting director. He liked the script. He was excited about it. He gave me a list of people to choose from. And I had thought of some people too who were at a level who might do a short film.
I know.
That were still good. And so, you know, and Lance Henriksen is an obvious choice for the role, where I'm like, it's Lance fits so well, but he'd already done a lot of schlocky movies. And I was like, well, I want to like get that respectability or whatever. And Lance does, you know, Birdemic style shit sometimes, even though he's perfect for it. And he's a great actor and he looks fantastic and he's a wonderful guy. And I love Lance Henriksen movies. So I talked myself out of it. And I went, okay, I'll go to my second choice, my third choice. They were either too busy, they didn't want to do it. A lot of them were already on TV and they were like, I don't need to do this, you know. And they turned it down, and then it got back to Lance, but my fifth or sixth choice. And then I was like, well, I think God again was going, are you stupid? It's Lance, you know, and he let me do it. And so the casting director will tell you your budget. He'll go, these people will do something like this for about this money, about a money. He asked me what I was willing to spend, and I told him about $5,000 a day, which is a lot, but it's not a lot. It's like, okay, I can do that. But when you're shooting with someone for 2 days, that's 2 travel days, and then you've got $20,000, which is, you have to pay them for the travel days, you know, because they're SAG. And so now you're spending a shit ton of money on this. But he's the only guy who can deliver the lines right. Like, he really nailed it. He was very good in the movie, and he was worth the money when you're considering that I can kind of generate this with research studies fairly quickly-ish. But it's a lot. And people are like, how do you get those people? It's like, you have to have money. Like, that's how do you rent a fucking, you know, a Porsche for a day? You pay for it, you know? And I rented a human. That is expensive. But he read the script, he called me, and we had a little 45-minute conversation. He was really nice about it. He was cool. I did not rehearse with him. I did not Skype with him or anything. You just, for that amount of money, that you were expecting them to work it out on set. In order to do that, I have to make sure that I have enough time to get Lance's shit in 2 days, because it's all I could afford. So no reverses on anyone else. It's just Lance all that day, and people feeding him lines. And I scheduled the movie that way, that people would be there, that I storyboarded the whole film, and I'd be like, okay, Lance is in the shot with Scott. Scott needs to be there. This guy, you know, Bill was not there, who plays the guy I'm fighting with, because he didn't need to be. He's not in any shots with Lance. So I did Bill's stuff first, and I scheduled the movie. Really? I scheduled the movie based on new. Interesting. Yeah, I suppose the movie as strategically as possible based on what cast I could have, because cast is expensive. You have to house them, you have to feed them, and they have a day rate. And so
that's right.
2 days with Bill, just his stunts and his shots. Then I brought on Tasha to act with Bill, and I did Tasha stuff, just Tasha and all that. And Scott and Clara came in then, and it was all of them together and then at the end of that, I bring in Lance, and it's all the scenes with Lance. Everyone shares a shot with Lance besides Bill. So I had him do his scenes, people feeding him lines. Then he leaves. Any more scenes before or after with Lance are someone else's shoulder. I used a lot of Lance's shoulder, and it's not him, it's somebody else in his sweater. All the shots of Tasha acting are clean. She's acting with me. So when she's doing her, you know, getting the rundown with Lance, it's not, you know, somebody else feeding him lines.
I would have never guessed that.
And you never guess, because you keep track of it.
Textbook movie magic.
Yes, and you keep track of it. You go, okay, she moved this way in the shot with me, so she has to do this with Lance and all that. And it's very continuity difficult. I did not have a continuity person. It's just me keeping it in my head. I also do not have dailies for a lot of this. So it's just me being like, remember Tasha did that? And I I happen to be able to keep that straight. If you can't, get somebody to help you with that. But and then the last few days are just the crew upstairs working on the dead body. I fly Michael back in so that he can be wrapped up as the dead body, and it's just me and Clara and Scott chopping up that room, and Tasha's gone home. And we do a few scenes of that, a few scenes then we do some shots in the RV with Scott. With Schnick, with Michael Schnick, who's Wiley, and Lance is not there again. He's already done his RV scenes on his 2 days, and it's just Hilarian's hands in that second shot, or we frame him out, and you notice in that scene, Lance is not in a lot of shots. I'm shooting around him for budget, but you don't notice, and you put him in the front seat. He's covered by the chair. And then the very last thing, this is important, I scheduled all my singles last. So any shot that is just me, close up on me, doing anything, I do last because I'm willing to stay after hours. I went over time because I had to finish a set piece. We had to finish that green room. And everyone went home but me. The cinematographer went home. My brother took over because he can shoot. He actually shot the restaurant scene. That was a kind of side day. And my friend stayed to hold boom and to roll film. It was just the three of us, my best, friends, Marty, Alex, my brother Hilarion, and me are doing all of my shots that are alone. And so really the moral of this story is that if you're an actor or whatever, and you think that you I can't do the scene unless I'm acting with the person I'm acting with, mid-budget to Hollywood stuff, you're acting with somebody reading you lines from a script. You're acting with a stand-in because they can't afford to have everyone there at the same time. And so you have to be able to do it as if you're doing it in an audition where it's really just you with as much as you can create yourself. So it was $20,000 to get Lance there and to do that. You got to give him a hotel room, all that. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too expensive. We actually got him Airbnb because we were out kind of middle of nowhere. And if you got to fly him business or first class, so that's like a $600 ticket. A car service has to pick him up and take him to the airport. That's a couple hundred, to $400 more. So it starts to get expensive, and then you have SAG fees. The pension and stuff like that costs another about $4,000 to $5,000. It's about a quarter of their pay goes to that. It's a lot of money, but I'd already spent all this money. Now it's just worth it. I'm not going to have a poor core of the movie if everything else is good.
Of course,
and also my sister made a good point about this when I got into South by. She was like, she'd been to the festival a few times, and she was like, you look at this program and everything looks the same and you don't know what to watch, and you're like, how do I discern quality? Oh my god, is that somebody I've seen? Is that Sarah Jessica Parker's in this, maybe I'll watch that. It's good enough to get her into it, because there's a lot of crap in these festivals. Even high budget festivals or high acclaim festivals still have some stuff that you're like, oh, I should have skipped that. So that's important. Also, I want the experience to work with a movie star. I do not want my first feature, when I'm pitching, again, when I'm being fund my movie, I want to be able to say I've done it all. I've already shot on 35. I've already built sets. I've already worked with SAG. I've already, had a big crew, and I've done stunts. I've done special effects. I've worked with movie stars. I have I've worked with casting directors. I don't want any sort of, and even with you, David, I've recorded live instruments. I know all of this. Nothing's going to blindside me. I have the experience. And I'll tell you what is interesting about working with a movie star is how much direction you can give them. They are used to killing it. They are good, and they are used to doing it their way. And you really have to play the game. I'm nobody compared to Lance Henriksen. You have to play the game of, could you do this again, this and that way, without, with also
sounding like a douchebag.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. But Lance had a lot of, because he's just kind of walking on and acting. He was not super duper prepared. He's not going to rehearse this for a week for my little short. And you have to expect that. This guy's got work to do, especially if you're casting somebody who's even more busy. Lance shoots a lot, and I'm just on his roster for February. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he shows up and he has the character worked out, but he hasn't. We haven't rehearsed or anything. And he doesn't have it super duper duper memorized. He's got it, but he probably worked on it the night before in the hotel. And so you structure your shooting in that way too. You go, I need I'm not going to hold on this dude. There's got to be cutaways for my movie star. I can expect one of my cheaper actors to fucking stand there and give a 5-minute monologue. I cannot expect this, movie star that. And I think that's actually fair. They're like, you got to pay me more. That's what I get paid. So a lot of his lines are broke up into chunks because he's got monologues. Broken chunks, cut to Tasha, and you should. It's good filmmaking too. It's good for the scene.
Yeah.
And
she's killing it, by the way. So you're not losing
she's killing
anything.
it.
Yeah.
And he's also cutting back to me when he's giving his monologue at the end. All those scenes are like, should I? That's the cut around. But he does a great job. But what's interesting about these people who do this a lot is they realize that the director controls everything. They can pace it themselves. They can try and make all these decisions. But the editor and the director is going to do what they want. They will even take lines from one take and, put it under another, which I did all the time.
Of course.
So they go, I just have to be genuine moment to moment. I just have to, my line right now, these 2 seconds, when I say, hey, get over here, it just has to be a good, hey, get over there. The rest of the scene, who gives a shit? Just worry about the second you're on. And they don't even have to match. The scene doesn't have to match itself. They will cut it up and put it together. And so it was great to watch him work in that. He's so relaxed. He's not like, oh shit, he's just like hanging out, listening to other actors. My line, nailed it. Okay, listening. My line again, nailed it. And so everything's kind of in a neutral. He's relaxed. Whereas the other actors are like holding their performance and like trying to keep going. And Lance is like, just worry about yourself and do your thing.
Neutral is so it's like he's giving you material to just we have this, we can even work with that.
The neutral always works to cut to. Just somebody sitting there listening is always usable. And it was the at ease that he had, because acting is really just relaxing. Like people like Pacino will just say, when you ask him how do you perform, he'll answer how he relaxes, how he loosens up. It's like performing. The problem is freezing up. The problem is thinking. The problem is getting in your head. How do you relax? And so Lance puts himself in a state of like, whatever, And so it's cool. It's low pressure, but it is. He got a little annoyed with me because I was very particular, and he was having trouble with some of the lines. And I was like, well, because what he says is a lot of meaning. And I'm like, if he changes like a have to a had, or a, will to a let's or something, it's like, you gotta fix it. And he's like, okay. And after a while, I had to earn his trust at the beginning. The first few hours was a little tense, and then after that, it was great. But he needed to nail it, and I needed him to nail it for us to be like, okay, we got this, But it was rough at the beginning, and by the end, it was very nice. I did keep him, as long as I could. And he's an old man. He gets a little grumpy at the end. So we're shooting the RV stuff last, and you'll notice in that scene, he's a little like, what? Huh? It's like it worked for the scene. It worked for the scene, yeah. But he was like, come on, and you have to be aware of that when you cast a movie star as well, is that you have to pay for them to spend time to rehearse, to do this stuff. You're getting there. All right, let me say these lines, whatever. And so it's on you as a director to craft the performance, not them. So Lance's performance in this, both in post with editing and on set, I was much more responsible for it. They're like, I'll do whatever you want. Just what do you want? And the other actors took much more ownership and were like, we're like, this is my character. And I think they would do this because they're at a lower level and they can afford to do that. They can dive in, and Lance can't dive in. He doesn't have the time for that shit. Anyway, so that's my long spiel about that, what to expect. They will pretty much decide to do your movie based on where they're at in their careers, the strength of the material, and how much you're paying them. The money like gets them to listen. It's like the reason also I pay people, everybody, not just Lance, I pay people the best I can pay them, because you want the confidence as a director that they're not doing you a favor. You ask somebody to redo something, you ask them to show up at 5 a.m. You don't feel bad about that. You don't want to ever put yourself in a position where you're like, will you make this movie good, please?
That's it's the same thing about that I'm thinking about when I'm inviting people for recording sessions, and I like to go the extra mile and surprise them. Like at the end. with something, because especially if I'm, and it's just a natural thing for me, especially if the process was thanks to them even easier, even lighter and nicer than it could have been. It makes for such better, for a much more fulfilling relationship with that artist, because they are all, if you're lucky enough, you're working with artists all over the place, like in every department that you're choosing people, they have their own artistic presence that they can bring, or they can withdraw, depending on how they feel, because that's not a thing that you, like you said, you're paying for somebody to show up, and then everything else is left to communication, proper like dynamics, because they're there, they're already bringing what you paid them to bring, but
My
then
time,
there's that extra layer on top that sometimes depends on little things like that.
Exactly.
And that was
they
so,
and it's nice that their manager will tell you. They'll go, this is the limo service they like. She wouldn't even, as far as like, he doesn't like flying American, you can do Delta and you can do this. Like they'll tell you what they like and you provide it. And it does help the process so much at the lower levels that we're at, that the higher levels just make it a part of the deal. To be like, you have to treat me well, this is going to be uncomfortable for everybody. And I want them, and you're right, that I really like the people who I worked with, and I want them to pay their rent and be able to get the groceries they like. It's so unsatisfying to be like, I got a deal, I got one over them. You want that with the technical stuff. You want that with like how much money it costs to develop your film. You want a fucking deal. You want a deal from the rental house, all these things. But people, I go, these are people.
Exactly. So I guess we touched on it obviously a little bit, but maybe we could discuss some parts of the scoring process and the score itself, and
finally get into it,
and your approach to it. And one of the main things, well, the thing I would start with is, as Danny Elfman puts it, the bane of his existence.
Temp music.
And that's a really important field in general for me, because I feel like we're not sure at this point if temp music as an approach has brought more harm or
pain or harm,
to filmmaking as a whole, because we have plenty of examples of for both sides. But so one of the things caught my attention when I saw the cut the first time was that the music wasn't the temp that you chose wasn't just things. Well, it could have been. I couldn't know at this point if it was just things that you love, but it would have been a great coincidence that you love things that are so in line with what you're, because a lot of directors just like to put music they love.
Right.
And but it was very particularly chosen, and it was obvious from the beginning that you chose things as close as possible to what you were going for. So that there's and of course I have to add, those were pieces they're not just random pieces of music. They have a story within themselves, and there are a symbol within themselves, as Holst and all that, and Herman. So
well, I'll just tell anyone listening, if they're curious, is that we use Saturn by Holst for the opening for the RV, and then a lot of it was North by Northwest, the kind of,
which is kind of, I mean,
Yeah, right.
Cool that that's our first
Yeah,
photo.
and so it was that theme from that one, not the main theme in North by Northwest, but the that was what I scored a lot of the busy work of cutting stuff up in the room and all that, and some of the other lesser known cues in North by Northwest. And then for the bullet loading part, where it's tense, I used what's that? The Untouchables, Ennio Morricone, where I believe it's the part where he's got the staircase with the what do you call that, with the baby carriage falling down, where it's those high sustained horns. Those were our main. There was our main temps, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else used in the movie. We didn't have anything for the restaurant scene, I don't think. No, I did. I did have some weird, some weird exotica music. Yeah, that was fun. But what was interesting about doing the temp score for this movie is I didn't do one for my last movie. I didn't do one for Casey Jones, and the guy really appreciated that. And I gave him a listening diet.
Always a nice thing.
Yes. So I gave him kind of a listening diet in the last movie of things that were kind of like what I'm going for, and he would listen to that and then kind of go, okay, I get the feel. That one was a lot more guess and check though, where he would come up with the cue and I go, not quite, and all that. It was a little more difficult. But this one, what I wanted to do with the temp score was less about the actual sound, where it's like I want, this kind of horn and that kind of, percussion. I wanted to communicate what was the usage of the music. Like the music here is relieving. The music here is sustained tension. The music here is mysterious. And Holst was that was a big important one, where the RV scene can go a lot of ways. I actually gave the footage to the actors early on because I kind of just told them, literally, it's going to take me years to fund this post-production. You could cut this together yourself, make a clip, put it on your reel, and I will, relink it for you. But you're going to have to do this on your own. I'm busy and I don't have, it's going to be years. And one of them did the RV scene. Scott did the RV scene, and he put Ring of Fire under it. Like they was listening on the radio, and it was just kind of some old, rockabilly sounding stuff. And it fit great. And I was like part of me was like, maybe I should put some Hank Williams under there. That's public domain. And I tried it actually with Lost Highway by Hank Williams under there. Yeah. And but I just went back to what was the original why I shot it that way and what it was supposed to feel like with the light passing. And I go, it's supposed to feel like, and I always described it as you're in a dark forest and you come across like a coven or something, or there's something mysterious in a cave. I wanted it to be, you come across this once every, full moon mysterious moment that you're not a part of as an audience. And I wanted the RDB to feel that way. And I was like, I need a piece of music to just, instead of explaining it with all these words to my composer, to be like that, And another reason I temped the movie is I wanted to catch some flies with honey, where I wanted to pick tracks. I knew that the composers would like my tracks and would be like, oh, I love that stuff. It's a great piece. But also I wanted to show them how the movie works. It clicks. I wanted the movie to work and to them to go, this movie is good. It works. And it wouldn't work without the music. So I do temp sometimes just to make people like the movie. And it to be as close to finish as possible, so they will fall in love with the movie and then want to submit. But if I was working at a higher budget level and I was just hiring,
whoever you wanted,
Horner or something, I wouldn't tempt the movie. I'd be like, you got it. It's because I'm not attracting him. I'm kind of striking a deal with him. It's probably less. It's probably more to do with the concept and who's in it, and less about they like the movie as much. But anyways, I was very proud of the temping in this one. I was like, well, this is gonna be hard to beat, and I think we did. I really like what we did.
So, well, I wanted to touch on the right way to use temp music, because that's not, it's not very common, and from a composer's perspective. So what you don't want is you don't want your director coming in, working on that cut for a year with the temp in it, which happens all the time. And so it's so interlocked in their mind that if you were to write just the next Ninth Symphony, like you were the next Beethoven or something, it would it wouldn't work for them because they just
Yes.
love this what they put in, and that's such a tough battle. And in most cases, that's what I tell to my like students and stuff, and that's what I do in my own professional life, is that if I see that they're not comfortable, or if I see that they're married to the temp cut to such an extent that anything is just bothering them, I'm ready to just simply step away, because I'm not going to be the guy that's just going to come in and make something as close as possible to anything, because that's not a composer's job. You can be an arranger. I can maybe reorchestrate a little bit, and you can just get some rights on that music and then change the instruments and make something great. It could be interesting. But if you want something original, then you go to a composer and you have to communicate. Otherwise, we're not on the same page in terms of why you need a score or why you need anything else. And so one of the tells, one of the good ways you can tell that it's not that is if the director can honestly and sort of particularly describe why not the temp.
Yes.
What they need that the temp is not giving them. And that was, I think, one of the first things we ever talked about after.
Yeah, I was pretty much like this, but not this. Yeah. Well, an interesting thing, I guess what I think was good to use temp is to not describe anything about the music, only about the feeling it. Because a lot of music can make, the feeling it can give is joy. And you go, I would like some joy here. Not this music, but joy.
Not upbeat music. Yeah.
It is I'm a little egotistical about that. I want my scores to be different, where I'm just like, man, this, I love this track on Star Wars. I want my own Star Wars track. That's its own thing. That is just as memorable. That is, where so many people I think are chasing, I'm as good as, and I go, no, I want to be among that. I don't want to be like, I don't want people being like, yeah, you can hang out in this arena too. I want to be a pillar of whatever someday, and I'm going to try now. And I'm like, I want all my scores to be something that somebody could buy a CD of and be like, this is its own special thing. And it doesn't just remind me of this, but lesser. And I liked it early on. We started immediately going, what like instrumentation can we do? We were never talking about it should be like the temp. We go, what instrumentation would you, never hearing this, would you think fits this? Should we go strings? Should we go woodwinds? Should we go, brass? And we definitely were on the same page with woodwinds. I remember we were all like, feels a little woodwinds fluty. And but it was the misanthrope and kind of the danger sound that we use for the gun loading and for some stings here and there, that we were like, we started with organ, and that was a fun try, because it really is a special instrument, the organ, but we had too much. I think we talked about it had too much baggage. It was too on the nose for what the organ had already been used for. And that's just history fucking us, because if the organ had never been used, we probably would have used it. But we talked about how I think the trombone was sturdy and interesting and moody and had some,
one of the things we discussed was the fact that it's not only got baggage, it has European baggage. And
yes, it sounded European. I remember that, and I wanted to sound American-ish or universal.
American than a brass instrument, I remember.
Yeah, we're absolutely the ba-ba-ba. And that's also fun to temp. It's good for a director to temp to go through stuff and realize what they don't like, because you can try things and go, yeah, no strings here. And I think I talked about that where I go, I'm not feeling strings because that's European to me. A real solo violin doing its thing, or a cello, I go, oh, we're in Europe now. But even some kind of Gershwin makes you think of some woodwinds and brass too, some American stuff. What's his name? What's that rodeo hoedown? Copeland. He's got a lot of brass and stuff. I'm thinking about what are the American sounds of, because Europe has taken so much of the classical traditions. But the other thing that I really liked that we kind of talked about was you immediately, because you're into the neo-symbolism, was
as I like
that
to call it.
that a lot of the characters immediately started to have their own instruments.
Yeah.
And we would take the Diacere theme and kind of put it through Bangs and put it through, put it through Wiley and all that. And it really worked well to kind of have it go through them each. But when we started to do the cleanup cues where they're chopping up the room, it got a little Peter and the Wolfie, and it would be like, and now the cat and this and that. And we decided to come up with kind of a sound for the team, which was cool. And that was a big breakthrough that took us away from the temp too. That,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
yeah, that we had it was really fun because I don't think we made it too obvious that they realized that the flute is playing for Donna and the corn glaze is playing for Wiley. It's there and it's not there. I think we came up with a good, and it was pretty apparent.
There's a balance.
At the get go, it's pretty apparent, and now I don't think people. It's kind of subconscious, which is what you like sometimes to do with your neo symbolism.
Oh yeah, I believe very much so that symbols work on a subconscious level, and that's not just me geeking out on Jung, because that's basically one of the core.
That's what he's always on about.
Yeah, exactly. But I believe it from a musical perspective. I believe that some symbols are, they're there for a reason, and we are yet to explore what music has to offer in terms of symbolic connections in the new era, let's say, because the only examples of musical symbolism we have so far are from the Baroque period or the Renaissance music, where certain things, as everything else in art at that time, were used as symbols of mostly religious concepts. And now we are at post everything era, where every type of breaking of every type of form has already happened in the 20th century, and we have I feel like we have a responsibility to how are we going to connect with future audiences and the audiences of now. That's not random, and it's not only based on feeling or emotion, because one of the things I hate the most as an expression in terms of about film music specifically is the emotion of the scene. I hate that just expression in itself. I think it's so misleadingly vague and generic that I feel like the less it's used, the more good is happening in the filmmaking industry.
Yeah, directing with a composer, talking to a composer, it really makes you think about the scene and go, there was kind of, up until then, with editing and acting and writing, there was a lot more utility. It was just a lot more like, well, he says that because that's how he gets him to open the door. Then you cut there because then you'd see what's in the door early, And then when you get to the end, you go, so what are you trying to say? What does the scene mean? What is the audience supposed to experience? And you're like,
composer is the therapist of your production.
Yeah, and you're finally there, and you're like, what am I trying to get? Why did I write that? It's a little late.
Down crying.
Yeah.
Seeing your father.
I'm writing because I'm not whole. That's why I wrote that. But it's really interesting to do that. And you're right that you don't want the emotion of the scene, happy, sad, or whatever. You want it to be like, you get more granular with, you want it to feel like they're finally giving in, or that they're resisting or whatever. And you go, well, that's a little bit more fun to write. What does it sound like when someone resists something? And you're like, that's not exactly an emotion, but it is an intangible kind of action. And the emotion is kind of what the audience feels. That's their part. We just kind of
you can talk about the emotion you want people to feel when they're watching this, and that's a totally different subject, I'd say.
But you're really just storytelling.
The problem with the expression emotion of the scene is not, it's the fact that very few scenes, or few films in general, I think, have scenes that are built in such a typological way that you have one or two emotions of that scene. You can have
That's a good point.
Like somebody can be as angry as they can be and want to kill somebody, and that doesn't mean that the emotion of the scene is, this scene is an angry scene. The scene doesn't have an emotion. Characters have emotions, or they're going through emotions, but that also doesn't mean that you should just mimic what the character is feeling, because the actor is probably already giving you that, and probably the cinematographer has to do something, has something to do with that as well. They're speaking about that. You should be telling the story. You should be moving with the character.
And I think a lot of what music can sometimes do is play with time as well. There were parts where we were working on this that you go, this is supposed to feel like surprising, or a clip, you know, and then this slows. It's all edited the same pace, but this part feels like it's taking its time, and this part feels like there's a ticking clock. And the music completely does that to you, where you're just like, oh, this scene's really taking its time. I go, no, it's not. And if you watch these great movies that you like, you'll realize the editing is always tight. They're always like, we make you feel like it's slowing down and going forward with music and sound design and delivery of lines. Yeah. But the editing has to always be tight. It is always tight. We always, as soon as you're bored with something or you get something, we move on. Yeah. And that was great in, what's it called? The gun loading scene, especially, where it's like, this is taking forever. It's not. That goes very quickly, but you just have you with the music have your sustained things and your, you know, whatever.
Layers of trombone. There.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was what's it what I say about music also, though, is that its utility in the scene, like you said, the audience can get several emotions from it, but the music has to accomplish what the scene is supposed to, I guess, do, if I'm going to be that vague. But a lot of times when I'm looking for music, I go, what I need this just to feel smart. Can you put a little boop, 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 doo, 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 doo. It's like a vibe you're adding almost sometimes. And the restaurant scene's very much that way too, where it works so much better with your music, where feels like they're just kind of having a nice little quirky little, you know, chill time. Regardless of the content of the scene, the vibe that you're supposed to get is injected in there, and you go, you get it, you know. I don't like manipulating audiences, and a lot of people think that music is to do that. Like, and then we put the score in here, and then they'll feel that, and you can see sometimes that trick in a movie. And you're like, oh, you're getting me to feel shit. Whereas I think the content should make you feel something, and music can enhance content. Like,
exactly. Yeah. Well, about that restaurant scene, I guess that's the point where I have to say, well, I have a question about it, and I have a comment. Well, not so much a comment, but I guess I'm not sure if I would have the chance to say that in any other scenario, but I think that the restaurant scene has the only example that I know of and that I've heard of the Dia Series theme used in a bossa nova genre in the style.
We're on the list.
Nova, which is so grotesque when you think about where the Dia Series comes from and all that, but it works so well within that particular story and those characters, because
especially the ominousness of that scene,
you know. You said about the instruments was right, and it's almost as if it was made with the decision in mind, because every character fit perfectly with their instrument from the woodwind family, and that was pretty cool to work with. And well, not only the woodwind family, but we talked about the connection between the brass instruments and how the misanthrope and lot are kind of like
he gets a French horn,
the same versions of in the polar opposite ends.
I think that I talk about, because they're both kind of psychos, and psychos can be good or bad. They're just people who do what they want without really a lot of societal pressure or conscious, and that can be, if you know what you want to do is good, or you know what you want to do is bad. And so I always say, like, the people who do the worst and greatest things are psychos, and everyone else in the middle is a normal person and has a little bit more of a herd mentality, which is the other characters. But you're right that Lot and the misanthrope are horns and they are not moving and they know what they want. And the end really describes that, where even no matter how good of a case Lot makes, the Mizner's like, I'm not ready to really, I'm not ready to go for that. It's funny about the Dies Irae is that she hums it at the end. We added that the very last minute. I liked your idea of having him have his own little theme. In the RV, the Dies Irae is introduced when it first cuts to the misanthrope, and he gets a few little, and then at the very end, we've established that Donna hums, but she was humming something else on set, and I needed to dub it, and I was like, she should hum the theme. And I had to call her in New York and have her record that and all that. I don't know if anyone's gonna catch that, but I'm sure music nerds are gonna be like,
probably. And I've sort of this. Well, I don't know why, but a lot of my projects have death as a main segment, like a central part of the story.
right?
Has to do with death, and so I never fail to like notice where we can use it and how, and it's so interesting. And that's the nature of a musical symbol, is that I'm not using, in a way you could say that I'm using the same material for those specific moments,
Right.
but that's almost like saying using this or that type of lens or lighting is like, oh,
That's a good point.
why should you use it? You know,
You've
every
already
time in every
used
film. You've
a 50 millimeter,
50 millimeter. When we use those sort of symbols, you have to clothe them into, you have to give them different clothes every time, because the story is totally different. It could be a different period, and we've done a lot of things with that, and I love finding new ways to do it. And I'm scoring a feature right now that we're finding new ways to do it there. For some reason, we have death as a main again, as a looming presence.
It's you, David. It's you.
Yeah, it's just stalking me. But I never felt, and I'm very sensitive to using similar material.
Right.
Either to my own or other people's things, but with that, it's just, first of all, it's not somebody's. It's it doesn't have an author in the same way that we know, and so it's the perfect musical symbol, one of the most well-known, of this sort. And I was glad that we were able to use it in an intelligent yet playful way that fits right within the tone of the film.
Yeah, the movie is very darkly playful.
Yeah, it has that. So,
well, I think interesting to talk about would also be not using music, which was something for the end fight, where there was no music in the temp, and we tried to make it. We tried some simple long tones and some things, but that
some Bartok.
what we had to deal with in this movie a lot was neutrality, where it's such a complicated movie tonally, where it's like, it's funny and it's dark and it's suspenseful, but it's not. And somebody's about to die and this guy's making jokes. She's worried. He's telling them, let it, sort out. And I don't think throughout the whole movie, there's probably only one straightforward. The music is in line with what is, and that's probably the gun loading scene. So it's to be dark and suspenseful, and it's dark and suspenseful. But even then there's some dissonance, because he's loading the gun, and Bangs is kind of jokingly like, he's loading that gun, and she's, instead of being afraid, she's taking the opportunity to kind of have a spat with him. Yeah. She's like, you did what? And so there's always that dissonance. So we needed like a base layer of like, okay, well, this is like serious though. Like, he's doing it, for them to play off of. So for any type of humor, you kind of need a standard, or at least, especially parody. We're not really parodying, but you need a standard of what is normal, and then you subvert it. And so there was a lot in the movie. The movie had already set a standard, and you needed to subvert it, and vice versa. And we kind of had this. It's attractive, nice to hear music when they're chopping up this body. and it's like and we didn't want to make it too like it's like dark, and I didn't realize it till just now that we would always end when they burst into the door, it's very like more door, bomb bomb, which is harsh and kind of like straight ahead, like ominous, but it is sandwiched between him saying it's sweater weather, motherfuckers, and then him being like, why don't you take a seat? We always have to subvert in this movie, and that's the way the feature version is. It's just that's the style of this movie. It's complicated to talk about behind the scenes, to be like, when we're working on it, to be like, well, it needs to be this, but it can't be too, whatever. And it was interesting because the ultimate hands-off, no neutral thing is to just not have music. Yeah. And I thought about doing that with the restaurant scene, but I decided against it. But it was definitely something we couldn't get to work in the fight scene because it was perfect without it. It was completely neutral of like, should I be? And I would love to see this with an audience. It sucks that this is South by is online this year because I want to eventually, hopefully, get to see it with an audience. Yeah. Because at that moment, it's like, should you be worried? Should you be having fun? Should you be whatever? And it vacillates moment to moment. And it really the score for that moment was just the commotion of it's funny, things. And we talked about that also where we're making the movie. I always back away from percussion in scores, where I'm like, the lines and the noises that are in the scene should be the percussion. If you want it to feel like kind of at pace, you usually should have like drawer shuts, this and that, let's go, give me that wallet, whatever, and it should have its own pace within the scene. And I think that the score usually kind of is more of an ephemeral thing on top. But we did sneak a little percussion in, and you put that bar talk in, and you're like, well, come on.
Which it's not really percussion. It's not considered percussion, but I love to use it as an alternative. Yes. And so, because it's so interestingly musical, because there's a lot of percussion in the orchestra and just in general. That's probably the most varied section of musical, family of musical instruments. But not a lot of them. So most of them involve some type of hitting of sorts between different objects. And with the Bartók pizzicato, you have a string that's so strongly pulled that when it goes back, it hits the board of the instrument, and it also makes the pitched sound of the
right.
The
and I like that as an alternative, which is partly why I used the tempo I did from North by Northwest, because it was melodic and percussive. It was it felt like both, and I go, that's the I almost never want to use percussion in a score because I think it's kind of cheap to and the only thing I like is when it's fully percussion, where I'm like, this is only percussion or no percussion
style, where you have just the drum set.
And there was a cue in Casey Jones where they did Japanese drums and all that, and I was like, yeah, cool, you can do that if you want. But there's something cheesy about it to me. There's something cheesy about, I hate snare. Even though I actually played that in band when I was in high school, junior high, but
maybe that's why you hate it.
I hate it. I'm getting but there's something so cheesy about it. There's actually a lot of, I also don't like that kind of loop percussion that they have in like modern scores today, when just something's going on. It's like, like it's so it's just not movie magic to me, I guess. It's like there's nothing magical about that drum loop that you're doing there. I don't like that at all. There's a lot of things that are popular now that I'm a little like not sold, waiting for that to pass, and
trend to be over with.
And maybe I'll like it nostalgically later. But I have that thing where when I was a kid, I was like, I don't want to listen to NSYNC, and now I'm only like, this sounds great. What's my problem? I think I need things to pass in the popularity for me to like be like, they're dead now, and I know it's not forever, and I can enjoy it. And that definitely goes with film scoring, where I'll watch a lot of movies and go, no, is this what we're doing? I don't want to do this.
It's the norm now. Well, you just want to be cool. That's part of being a filmmaker, is being cool and hip and outside of the time.
One of the little questions we talked about going over is what is something that you thought about the score would be like before we started working on it? Were there any things that you were a little surprised? You go, oh, I thought we were going this way, but I guess we're doing that.
Well, that goes in line with the things we discussed about the temp.
Yeah.
I guess you're much more. It's much easier to get a different idea than the director's vision when you don't have temp. That's probably one of the main reasons directors use temp, especially if their communicating skills with the composer aren't as good.
So good. Yeah.
But it was, I'd say, having the temp there and it being used as it was, my natural instinct was to think how and why I'm going to go in a different direction. So one of the things I was waiting to hear is you saying, you know, I don't, the temp doesn't give me this and that, and I need that. So that's part of the thing. But then for me, at least, there also always has to be a layer on top of that or beneath that, depending on the way you look at it, which is inherently mine within that musical structure. And by mine, I don't mean my signature or anything like that. It's more of my personal connection with those characters, the story, the universal or symbolic way I see them, and the way I believe they sound. And a certain space can have a certain sound, a certain, a character can have a sound. Everything that's used in a film can have, if needed, a perfect sound for it. That's what I go by. And so maybe it wasn't so much me projecting something that turned out to be wrong, but I was surprised by the new things that arose out of thinking outside of the temp, because it already seemed, as you said, you did a pretty good job with choosing the temp. So it already seemed that it was there. So the first challenge was to me to see exactly why it wasn't enough. And then the new kind of the new level it reached, the new wings it suddenly took when we moved further into the story and trying to find its perfect, clothes that perfectly fit that. Because before that, it was with expensive clothes from like famous brands, but it wasn't the exact fit for that person. Right. And we needed to make it so that everything is in line. Every little, proportion is right.
The music is so good that I think people take it for granted. They probably think that I got it off of, I stole something. I'm like, no, that's original to this movie, which is, I think, unique for a short. A lot of them don't have that, especially live instruments. And so,
especially those types of instruments, because that's another thing that
usually guitar or piano.
We didn't just use woodwinds. We had, those characters had something very specific to each and every one of them, so that we had the chance of using an alto flute and a cor anglais instead of an oboe, and a bit of a bass clarinet, and all of that. And especially with the trombone, it was all sorts of iterations with different types of mutes that we used for the trombone, as well as different types of mouthpieces.
Yeah, we went through a whole list of like different mutes that they rented and tried, and like, how about this mute, how about that mute, and I forgot about that. That was great. That was fun. That we had a whole day of recording with the full group, and then it was just a whole day of layering the trombone over it. which is or not a
that
whole day,
was-
but a whole session. And
It was a full session, yeah, definitely.
yeah,
And he brought like it must have been like 5 or 6 mutes of different shapes and sizes
yeah.
that all did their own thing, and we just
And
had to pick the right
Trombone's
ones.
it's a hard instrument to do solo.
Oh yeah.
It was definitely, I was impressed with that guy, and it's you
great.
made that clear to me that it's when you have a smaller ensemble, it's almost a little harder because you can hear everybody and everyone's got to be
Every breath,
right
every
on
clap.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked some of that. How that came across. Well, yeah, working remotely, we should talk about that. I've never done a score, of course, in person, because when you're hiring musicians, you usually don't just use the guy next door. When you're I'm not music composers,
Yeah.
usually use the guy next door. You're like, you put out a call and somebody in Oregon is good and use them or whatever. So I've only done this remotely, and I think it actually versus so many other. I would hate to edit a movie remotely. I would hate to, color it.
Yeah.
But scoring it is not so bad because there's a lot of individual work where you go and kind of tinker and come back. And even if we do want to tinker together, we can Zoom now and you can open up your project with me and I can hear the feedback. But what I really think I like about it that has helped in this and other projects is it forces you to be very clear with your notes as a director, is that a lot of times you have a conversation with somebody, you'll say 10 things and then you'll hear it and they've only got 4 in there and you go, oh, I bet a lot of that was lost because we were just fucking talking.
Yeah.
And it's good to sit down and go, at this time code, this thing sounds a little this, or we should take out that or whatever. And that's the way I usually do it. But you and I ended up kind of forgoing that and just kind of jumping in, which is a little rare for both of us.
That's actually surprising. You asked about surprises. It wasn't within the material, but that's definitely one of the things that I would. If one of my students came and just told me, "Well, I'm working on a project. My director wants to sit within the session with an open project and start moving notes around and moving different sections," I would just immediately tell them to stand their ground and tell them to F off.
you get out of here. I'll come back with a chase. Well,
because usually it doesn't go well.
It usually doesn't go well, but it's a weird thing to my directing style that I don't think it's effective for me, or if I'm even able to not direct from a pretty technical place. Whereas a lot of directors might go, this feels, a little rushed, or, to an actor be like, try to explore these things. I actually talk to them about the technical things of acting, like try a substitution of this, or pick up, take a little beat here if you can or whatever, because I'm talking about what they're going to have to do in their head and translate my notes. I go, let's take away the abstract and talk about that. And that really comes into play with music, where I go, we should probably take these bar talks out, but keep this one, or we should maybe finish this melody here. Doing it that way instead of going, this just doesn't feel mystical enough.
It's not the right.
It seems so. It seems so. Because I'm immediately jumping to
time. Yeah.
It saves you time, and I'm immediately jumping to how to technically solve the problem versus I have a problem and it's this. What do we do?
Yeah.
And luckily, we get along enough and are able to do that and agree on enough that. And you're great at showing me things. You're so knowledgeable that you can go, well, a doodly did do feels this way, and a doodly dad do feels like that, and you can give me options so quickly. That is so interesting.
Well, that was I was thinking about that now that you're saying that it wasn't just the surprising thing wasn't even the fact that you were open to that, or that you wanted to try changing stuff within the project live,
which I think was actually your idea. I think you started like, well, hold on, let me fuss with this. I think
exactly was what I was going to say. I was surprised by the fact that I felt so comfortable talking about it and exploring it. It's a very specific thing to, I guess, to working with you, because it didn't change the way I look at things. If a new director I meet tomorrow comes in and starts meddling around with my project,
you're like, I gotta get to the cave. It's the cave, not you.
First of all, they probably wouldn't, and you didn't, as you mentioned before. It wasn't your initial a response, it was coming from me, which surprised me. And I thought about it during the process of like, I didn't know I had that in me. And yes, there is a part where you start thinking, okay, well, I need to have some creative decisions that are mine so that I can feel proud of what I, accomplished with it.
Which is why we usually kind of just tinkered with what you brought. I don't think we ever really rewrote anything. And I would even try to rewrite stuff with you a little bit where I go, I don't know if this melody is going to work for the, I think it was for the team. And then you went, what, maybe. Oh, and you got it to work. You didn't let go of it because it was part of your structure and all these things. And I didn't fight you on it. And that is something that my brother, who also directs, I was talking about, he's like, have you ever been completely satisfied with a score or performance, something? He was kind of imparting me that he never quite feels, like he really got what he was hoping for. And I'm always like, I think it's good to not maintain really those expectations and to treat not only the film, but every piece of it, the score and the performances, like you're raising a child more than you're creating a robot, where you can influence a child, but it kind of takes on his own, the kid's own life, and you're proud of them, but they're their own thing, and you're nurturing it more, and it's growing on its own. And I go, I'm just kind of want the score to be good and its own thing. And if I want it to be a particular way, I will go to music school and learn how to do it, because there are definite parts of the movie that I did. Like I think more than a lot of directors, I do go like, I want to do a lot of the stuff. And those I am very particular about. And I tried to hire somebody for the art design and for, the sound design. And I ended up having to do it myself because I was like, oh, I'm too particular about this. But the score is a thing that I go, I just love commissioning an artist to bring something and do their thing. And it's like commissioning a painting where you're like, look, they drew the family. And with you, like I said, I was like, most of the adjustments I had it was more my editing brain to go, this needs to slow down, this needs to be a little more complicated or more bare. It was mostly kind of mixing what you got and let's finish this melody, and you would finish it, but I'd be like, I think I need the melody to finish. I think I was doing almost more like what an editor does to a writer.
Yeah,
I wasn't writing.
You can credit yourself as a music editor for the film.
Yes, yes, exactly. And it was crazy doing the trailer with you. I'm really proud of the trailer, and no one's gonna know that you did the music for the trailer. We just kind of whipped that out one day, and we just kind of pulled it out. We're like, let's find some instruments, and
And I'm so I'm so glad that I still have all of the materials on that, because in the trailer, the trailer we found a very interesting percussive sound that we didn't use for the film at all.
It's not like the film at all, yeah.
But it still has the same tactile, woody, earthly type.
It could have been a cue.
Feel it's shot on film, like that type of a feeling, because it's not really an existing instrument. It feels exactly like somebody found some wooden pieces in his
just arranged them,
and he was like, he randomly banged one in the table, and it was that sounds, it has a pitch.
And that was and that was fun to abstractly talk about that and go, it needs to feel curious but not too ominous but not too fun. It was very fun you're so good at, and no one will know this unless you work with David, but he could, like I said, he can just change a note and go, this makes you feel like there's suspense. You move the note here, and then suddenly it's resolved, and it feels like, and we definitely had that. We just need to move a note. It's almost like we need to move a note so that it feels less ominous and more curious and and you could just do that. You go, you're talking about right there, and you were ready with it. And so it was interesting as a director it was like working with an actor again, where I just talk about what I need, and you accomplish it, and you go, I got that right here. And sometimes it's great to work with actors. Scott is very good at this, where, he can kind of move a note, if you would, where it's like, you're saying the line, could you bring me that TV? And then it's like, I need it. He'll just be like, could you bring me that TV? And it's like, oh, suddenly he's distracted, and he just makes a minor adjustment. And you're like, yes, that's good.
It can be so frustrating when people overkill or just overshoot something like this. So you give them a note, and it's this kind of the same like with musicians with conducting.
They overtake the note.
Because I had to conduct the score as well. But during recording, and I specifically wanted to hire people that I know can be subtle, because all of the, if I can just describe this whole thing in one word, would probably be subtle. Although we have, strong, loud parts or whatever,
Right.
it's the influences that it does and the way it moves between states is mostly subtle, and it's very hard to work with people who just when take something to the extreme immediately, and then it's very hard to bring them back, and they start feeling frustrated, especially if they want to make it good. And it's very like a very rewarding process to have that subtlety within communication and within each artist's way of expressing themselves for the film.
You did get some great performances that
Yeah.
oh man, that Corenglace, oof, and those little touches with everybody, the whole thing. It's hard to be subtle with the trombone, and that was impressive that he could just kind of inch it in. That was an interesting process
them one
because
by one.
Yeah. What do you mean you picked them one by one? The musicians?
We didn't use because it's a chamber ensemble, but we didn't use an existing chamber ensemble, although some of those people had, of course, played together before. But I sat with Martin, the flautist, and we just went through every possible local
of course, yeah.
Musician for each and every role. I told him in advance that I need a specific character for every one of those instruments. So I'm not hiring an oboe player. I'm hiring Wiley.
Exactly.
In musical form. So, and that turned out to be a Corenglace at the end, but
and he's a young guy. He's got that Wiley vibe.
Yeah, he's a young guy, and the only one that is not really fitting is that the youngest person was the French horn player.
Right. I think I got confused. I was thinking of French horn. You're right.
Who was working on a lot of stuff. But yeah, the Corenglace, they were all young people. I wanted to work with fresh.
Well,
minds.
there is something about, especially if you're doing a lower budget project, the young people are going to put their heart into it, and it's fresh to them, and the old people are like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah, whatever.
And I think about that. Yeah, I think about that when networking. A lot of people want to network with these successful people, but they already got their buddies. You need to find the up and comers and network with them. But the recording was an interesting process because I couldn't be there because it's in Bulgaria, and it wouldn't be a good idea to have me just monitor the whole thing and watch and be like, what's going on with that oboe? But I remember giving we had an amount of time that we had to do it. I remember giving my last like ditch effort for notes and be like, okay, in that cue, make sure you blah blah blah, or it's just you gotta worry about this. Okay, you got it, and you nailed it, of course. But it was fun to just kind of walk around and hang out, and then I'd get a cue, and you'd be like, what do you think? I'd be like, this is great. And you would do the same with the mix. You'd mix it and you send it. Be like, what are you thinking before we finalize it? Because you guys mixed it right after, which was cool.
Yeah,
immediately. And we kind of had a deadline. Actually, we're coming up on the Sundance submission. But there's nothing more exciting than the movie being made without you. Like it's getting done and it's getting done well, and I'm not there. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's exciting for some, probably nerve-wracking. And crazy for others, for the very hands-on people.
I really love just commissioning artists. That's what you get to do all over with, you find people you're a fan of and they do your thing,
like
and then you get to keep it. I want to talk about with you, what are some creative pitfalls that you get into that are unique to you, that you're like, or some problems you have while trying to create?
Well, it's different with when it's film scoring and when it's like concert music or chamber music. But I mean, inside of the storytelling field. Well, the main one is my excessive need of 100% consistency within symbols, themes, motifs.
All right, I ran into that with you. Yeah,
instruments and all that. Where, and I think I'm getting over that more and more, and I'm finding a right balance right about now. But I had a problem. I've stumbled upon this problem with me where I love being intertwined and interconnected and having intertextual, almost like systems of themes and motifs, and sometimes they're in the form of drawings or other things, but and I sometimes lose track of the aesthetic side of it, where that's where most composers put most of their effort in. They want to make a beautiful piece of music that people just respond to and find themselves in. And I had a recent experience with this great new American Korean picture that won at Sundance and won a Golden Globe for a foreign film called Minari. And the score of that film is written by a guy who I've come to respect a lot. He's Emil Musseri, who wrote the score to this film while it was just text. It was just he had the script and he wrote the score. I guess they probably tweaked some things in the edit, but he wrote beautiful music that just fit within the pacing of the film, and he didn't focus all his efforts into creating intricate, systems of themes and being symbolically consistent between, the beginning part of the film and what's happens in the middle, and how the dramaturgy of it all just comes together. And he's not so worried about the arc of every single character and all that. He's just doing something that's much more subconsciously connected with the way we perceive sound and timbre, and how we connect, for example, a guitar sound with the American South, and how we connect a voicey type theremin sounding synth instrument with a voice, and how that connects with the and what we do with the piano usually, I mean, in terms of perception. So he just wrote very it feels very natural and very almost spiritual, but in the most non-pretentious way. And I got reminded of the fact that on top of like the one of the most important things that you should never lose track of in film scoring is that the music needs to connect with the audience, and then after you found the tone or the way to approach that, you go into combining everything into the story, and as I like to say, going into the veins of the film, of the story, and moving with it subconsciously, almost with the audience. But it needs to have an aesthetic that's I would dare to say remarkable, an aesthetic that you notice immediately when you hear it. I don't mean notice in the score specifically every time, but I mean when you hear it outside of the film, or when you're just experiencing it, that it's something very particular that's for that story alone, not just for any story, that also moves you and creates experiences within you that's how I would describe my goals. And a pitfall, as you asked, that I've struggled with is just wanting to be entirely consistent in everything and just losing track of a simple aesthetic that can make the score just connect more with people, and me caring so much about, you know, it being this finished work of connections and story within story, and musical you know, consistency. And it has to have a bit of both, otherwise you're just losing your audience. But yeah, that's something I've been working on, and Reklaw helped me with that, definitely, with your approach and what we did. But just in general, in 2020 I had the chance to express more freely for the projects I worked on, and I work for some contemporary dance pieces and some theater work, where I had been given the opportunity to just create within a certain spectrum, but not too tight. So I was able to reconnect with my aesthetic, you know, music making, and the more improvisational side of things, and that was very, you know, it was rewarding. And I feel like whereas most people strive for the aesthetic first, I had the problem of trying to combine both. And I'm glad that I've been given opportunities to work on that. That's very nice. And I would I would have to ask the same thing in terms of well, your process is much more complex, but I'd say
overall,
which part of the process, maybe in which, you know, step of the way.
Overall, I think I have trouble making my work feel like human. You know what I mean? Emotional, vulnerable, whatever. Because I love intellectual ideas. I like structures. I like, you know, through lines and all that stuff. I like the movie to be paced perfectly and the lines, you know, time just right and everything, you know. And I kind of treat it like, you know, kind of like music or whatever. I go, this lands and that goes there, and then this goes over here, and it, you know, organizes very well. And I have to remind myself to inject it with some humanity once in a while and be like, oh shit, are any of these characters like frustrated with each other, or is this guy like insecure because he told me, you know, I have to remind myself to make it a little human. And I'm getting better about it, but I kind of like do like I'm not as much an emotional person. And when I feel like lots of little monologue, it's in the feature and the short, I wrote that all at once because I was like, oh, I'm feeling something. And just like, I didn't change it much because it's rare to me. Whereas a lot of directors, they're just all emotional and she's trying to do the thing, and then it was closed, and you know, and everyone hates her, and they don't have any structure, and the pacing is terrible, and it's all emotional. And I've got to remind myself to grab a little what they got and put some drops of that in there. Even though I think one of the attractive things about movies is that they're a simplified, structured version of the things that we care about. I have to rough up the movie a little bit with some humanity. And I've been watching things that, you know, that I like about that. Like even when I watch King of the Hill, I go, oh, that's such a human little decision that character made, and a little nuance. And a lot of my stories, the characters are doing things based on logic and their goals. And that's the kind of person I am. I'm goal, I'm logical and all that. And I have to remind myself to be a little more irrational and to think from, when have I done something that made sense but didn't make sense, you know? So that's what I'm trying to explore as a filmmaker, is like what makes sense humanity, you know, as a human decision, but that an alien would go, but this does not, you know, whatever. I think a lot of people would read my screenplays and they're a little too everything. And everything makes a little too much sense. Like I want there to be parts where it's like, why would he do that? But I get why he did that. But why did he do that? You know, everything's too justified. And creatively, I also have the pitfall of I resist doing anything that's been done before, that is kind of rote. And I have to remind myself that I know that to me, directing is you have like a little puzzle box thing that you're just moving elements until they click into place, and vibrate. So I'm like a little quieter on the sound design, maybe a little bit bigger on the acting, whatever, and little looser on the edit, and then eventually it clicks into place and the scene hums. And sometimes those elements are something kind of a little cliche, a little bit normal. I for the longest time when I would shoot things in high school, I would never do a shot reverse shot. It would always, as soon as a shot reversed once, I go, we got to cut to something else. We got to do something, because it was too standard. And I'm like, standard is sometimes part of the piece of the scene, the music or the editor, the whatever standard, but the acting and the line and the art design is weird, and it's a perfect match, and the scene works. I'm not as worried about being original anymore as making the scene work. And sometimes doing what's normal and familiar is just the right choice. So I'm trying to give myself license to be normal, I guess. I have some more abstract advice and some practical advice. I guess I can move it together in a way that it's always worth it to go all out. I've never been happy that I held back. I've always, and another way to put it would be never talk yourself into doing it somebody else's way. Don't do it. Don't. I've always regretted going, what I want to do is this, but I'll do that. And, I should do this, but I think that's the way that this guy gave me the advice to, or that's why I should do it. Because either two things happen. It turns out well, and it's unique to you, and it's genuine, and it's good, or it doesn't turn out well, and you learned something and you grow. You're not going to grow just taking people's word for it. You have to do it your way, either to learn your lessons or to make something great. And the other thing is, what I said is, it's always worth it to go all out. Do it your way, all the way. Go, well, I really want to have 30, yard gnomes in this scene, but I don't know. It's like, figure it out. Do all 30, and either along the way you will change your mind, and it'll still be genuine to you because you have changed, or you will do it and you'll go, I'm so glad I fucking did this. Even though I've had, I'm in debt and I've had these, it's difficult and all these things, I'm so happy that I stuck to my guns. And any project that I abandoned and I didn't finish, it was because I did it somebody else's way, or I talked myself out of going all the way with it. And I said, I'll do a half measure here because it's just practice. I'll go, just threw it away. You don't learn anything by half doing anything. Every time, every time you write a piece of music, try and write the best piece of music you've ever written. And but there's so much advice out there of other filmmakers and stuff. It's like, I do it this way, you shouldn't do it that way. People will talk you out of everything. Every cinematographer will tell you, I made a big mistake on my movie. A couple reels are damaged because something went out of sync in the film camera, and it's because I tilted it on its side. And the way that the magazine is made is it has empty space on one side so it can turn regular. You tilt it this way, it's okay. You tilt it that way, it's going to unspool. And I tilted it to the right. I didn't know to do that. Messed up my stuff. My cinematographer was definitely resistant. He didn't know that would happen, but he was like, I don't know if you should do this. And I was like, just try it. The shot wouldn't even frame right. I didn't even use a shot. I was just like, all right, take that thing down. And then 2 reels were broken. There's ribboning in the movie. I had to spend so much time trying to get it rescanned. It didn't work. I learned so much because I did it my way, all the way. And I know so much about film now because something went wrong on my movie. And now I'm like, I can tell you what'll happen in the worst case scenario. I can tell you what your options are. I can tell you where, what you can't fix. I can tell you what you better not do, when you're shooting it. I wouldn't have learned any of this. Everyone just goes, just keep the camera upright, expose for the shadows, the end, higher f-stops,
Nothing
sharper.
crazy.
Just not crazy. And now I'm going to do those things, but I'm doing it because I want to, and I actually know why I'm doing it. So you don't learn. Anyways, was that concise? I think
it was perfect. I think it was perfect.
Okay, great.
You've reached 911. To report a murder or dead body, press 1.
Fucking stairs. Why don't you come and have a seat with me?
Look it up. Expired in altercation with inmate number 419.
punishment without love behind it, you'll come out worse.
Who are you people?
Oh, no. It's sweater weather, motherfuckers.